Sup, my fellas. Don't forget to leave feedback, and enjoy the story. Mana particles were flying in the darkness. The man stood over the guy and asked if this was another alien from another world. The protagonist opened his eyes wide. He was kneeling. His gaze fell on the city. Holding the back of his head, the stranger asked him where to start. He said with a serious look that firstly, he understood that the guy was confused, he needed to calm down and listen to him. The protagonist lifted his t-shirt and began to touch his stomach. Various warriors appeared in his imagination, and we were told that this world is called Area. There are swords and magic in it. The protagonist imagined a huge horde of monsters, while we were told that there are also hordes of demons and monsters. Because of them in this world, there is an endless struggle for survival. Particles of energy hovered around the warriors, and the plot told us that this world has the ability to draw aliens from other dimensions into its battle. We were shown a large settlement, and told that they would first end up in this city, the border city Xenovis. Looking at the frightened guy, the man asked if he had studied magic or martial arts, to which he received a negative answer. Turning around, the stranger suggested that the protagonist was out of class, adding that he would explain in more detail on the way and asked his name, after which the protagonist introduced himself as Chuck. Stretching out his hand, the man said that since he had met him, he could not leave him to his fate and offered to go and eat, and he would explain everything about this world area. The delighted protagonist thanked him. Entering the alley, the man held out a flask for Chuck to drink. The protagonist took it and thanked the stranger again. He began to greedily drink the water. His cheeks puffed out. The protagonist spat water in the man's face. Pouring the contents of the flask onto the ground, Chuck stated that it was not easy to pretend to be a newly hatched rookie, and then asked if he wanted to give him the goblin paralysis poison to drink. The furious protagonist reported that the poison dissolved in water was tasteless and colorless, but it had an almost imperceptible, unpleasant odor, and it tingled slightly on the tongue, but it would tingle much more strongly in the eyes. Holding his face, the man asked how Chuck knew this. The protagonist extended his hand when the stranger concluded that this was not a newly called rookie in Area. Standing in front of the man, Chuck replied that he was just that, newly called classless. He struck hard between the stranger's legs. The protagonist noticed the blade that was in the bandit's bosom and said that he had 13 years of experience. Chuck grabbed the knife. He took it from the man. Swinging the dagger, the protagonist asked if the man remembered the rule of Area that no one can be trusted. Examining the items, the protagonist wondered if the man only had 100,001 dagger. Hanging the knife on his belt, Chuck thought that it was better than nothing, just his body. The protagonist remembered how he examined his stomach. He imagined himself from his past life and emphasized the fact that he immediately realized and did not find a single scar or muscle. Indeed, he returned 13 years ago, the moment when he first appeared in Area. Looking up, Chuck mentally assumed that this artifact really worked. The protagonist imagined his image from his past life and told that his name was Chuck. He was 27 years old, and before returning he was a mercenary of rank C. He had a standard poor life. He earned just enough to last until the next day. The protagonist's face was furious as he said that without innate talents and noble origin, he was deprived of the path to the top. He was in constant search of a solution to this problem. Chuck imagined how he came across a large red crystal and said that he seized the slightest chance. He was lucky. He found an unknown dungeon, and after an exhausting battle he found a small chest. The protagonist with great hope in his eyes opened the chest. There was a pink stone in the box, and Chuck said that inside he found only this stone, and since then he carried it with him. He could not find out what to do with it and why it was needed, after which a notification popped up that the return stone was activated. He would be moved to the point of departure 13 years earlier. The protagonist with a thoughtful look began to reason that he saw this notification right before his death. Chuck presented the stone and suggested that it was needed to return its owner to the past. He with a puzzled look asked to show the characteristics. Looking at the window with characteristics, Chuck read that he had no abilities. Holding his head, the protagonist thought that this was the same thing. He had a glimmer of hope. But now he realized that he ended up in Area with exactly the same characteristics as last time. With a dumbfounded face, he came to the conclusion that in this case, this is a pointless return. Chuck began to walk forward and thought that he has 13 years of combat experience in Area. His memories are not so detailed, but he remembers some of the most vivid events. Standing in front of the gate, the protagonist emphasized the fact that he can use some privileges for classless. On the doors it was written that this is a chiropractor's building. The protagonist introduced the girls who fight and told us that different people from other worlds come to Area. Among them are magicians and martial artists, but most often, classless people come to Area. Chuck imagined himself holding the sword in his hands and thought that classless could become whatever they wanted, and there was even a special growth booster for them. And although it sounded good, in practice classless were always the bottom of the Area food chain. Frowning, the protagonist began to reason that they initially had no abilities and therefore most of them simply died without having time to develop. Such was he. A C-rank mercenary, humiliation, poverty, a constant struggle for survival. That was what his life had been like for 13 years. Looking at the bug, Chuck emphasized that all that awaited him was an inglorious death. He had achieved nothing and did not remember a drop of joy. Adjusting his glasses, the old man asked if the protagonist wanted an operation to improve his skeleton. The protagonist answered with a serious look that he did, and in his thoughts noted that this time he would do anything to make his life better. Looking at his hand, Chuck received notifications that his skeleton had been upgraded to a low-level martial artist skeleton. He had learned the heavenly concentration technique. The protagonist imagined the various spheres and noted that he now had 2 directions for growth. This was something he had not received in Xenovis last time due to ignorance, and thus he had cut off his path to rise in society. The protagonist imagined his skeleton and cried out that the first direction was given to him by the skeleton improvement operation. Now he had a special skeletal structure that allowed him to easily master martial arts. Many needles were sticking out of his body. While Chuck thought that he needed to take advantage of the moment to get such a favor from the master, this was the first thing he would do when he got to Xenovis. He handed the wallet with money to the old man and thought that a prerequisite for free skeleton improvement was to be classless and without skills. In the past he did not know about this, and therefore could not improve the skeleton, but in this life he would do everything right. A notification popped up that the skeleton of a low-level martial artist is ideal for mastering martial arts, giving a slight advantage in speed over an ordinary skeleton. Clenching his hand into a fist, Chuck thought that since this chiropractor would soon die, in the future there would be no more out-of-class ones receiving such an improvement. Now he has an improved skeleton and a special growth booster. For out-of-class ones, this is the path to quick success. Looking at the book, Chuck cried out that the second opportunity for growth, which can only be obtained in Xenovisa, is the technique of heavenly concentration. The man was enveloped in a purple aura, and the main character said that this is a basic technique for accumulating spiritual energy. There are many techniques for working with energy. They differ in the level of control over energy and the speed of its concentration. He drew attention to the book on the shelf and added that in his past life he learned the usual technique of concentration of the second level, and only later learned that in one old, inconspicuous bookstore Xenovisa there is a book about the technique of concentration of the first level. Standing in front of the man, the protagonist bought the book and told us that the bookseller did not know about its true value, and he bought this book for pennies. Smiling, Chuck thought that he had corrected the early mistakes that in the past deprived him of a chance for a better life. 2 out of 3 chances were not missed, and all this on the first day after returning. In his imagination, a picture of the arena appeared and the protagonist added that the 3rd chance is to win a prize in the tournament in the Colosseum. This tournament will take place exactly 1 year from now. Walking down the street, the protagonist reasoned that the requirements for participants were too low because this tournament was only for out-of-class people. He calmly emphasized that he was more than confident in his chances of winning, provided that he stayed in Xenovisa for a year and devoted time to training. Now he should quickly find a job to live somewhere. For this he needed to earn at least 30,000 euros a day. Standing in front of the man, Chuck came to the conclusion that he needed a job where he could also hone his skills. He would be a monster hunter. Looking up, the man asked if Chuck wanted to buy something. Looking at the items, the protagonist said that this armor would probably suit him, and the merchant suggested that its owner was just his size before he met his death. The enthusiastic protagonist asked to give him the armor, a spear and several daggers. Holding his chin, the merchant asked if he had any money, to which he replied that he had 60,000. The man began to laugh loudly and cried out that he wanted at least 300,000 for everything he had chosen. Smiling, Chuck asked if he could pay in installments. The merchant's face was puzzled. The protagonist pointed at himself with a serious expression and asked how much the man would pay for his clothes. The man listened attentively, saying that they were made in a very technologically advanced world. He was sure that there would be many who wanted them. If the man found the right merchant, he would give much more than 300,000. The man began to laugh even harder with tears in his eyes. Looking at Chuck, the merchant asked if he thought that he could press on his pity with his puppy eyes. The merchant pointed his finger at him and said that Chuck was out of class and that the milk had not yet dried on his lips. The protagonist leaned over and said that he would be very grateful if they sold it to him for such a pittance. The man held out the armor and agreed that the protagonist could pay in installments. The merchant grinned and said that impudence was the second happiness. He respected those who did everything to survive. If it helped him survive, he would be only glad. The protagonist smiled and thanked him. The protagonist came to the forest with a spear in his hand. Touching the new armor, Chuck began to think that even light armor increased the chances of staying alive several times. He did not regret that he had spent everything he had earned and got into debt. It was worth it. The protagonist remembered how the man laughed, and noted that in his past life no one had done him such favors. After which he wondered if he had become luckier in this life. Luck is a phenomenon that few people in area had heard of. Taking a step forward, Chuck emphasized the fact that it was possible that the merchant was planning to betray him and profit from him somehow. It was better to be careful. The protagonist stopped in the middle of the forest. Looking up at the sky, The protagonist thought that he remembered the first time he came there to hunt in his past life. Holding a club in his hands, the protagonist was trembling with fear. His face was impassive. Chuck laughed and said that he was very pathetic. Notifications popped up that the protagonist remembered the technique of lightning jump, steel-breaking skeleton, stone-breaking blow, spirit-knocking spear. Chuck began to run quickly. His gaze fell on the goblin. The monster turned its attention to the protagonist. The protagonist was preparing to attack with a spear. He pierced the goblin's head through and noticed that this was the technique of spirit-knocking spear. The monster flew to the side. Dust rose from the goblin's fall. Chuck suddenly frowned. His hand was injured. Examining the wound, the protagonist thought that the lethal shot is a technique of shooting a spear with the left hand. At first, leaves burns on the palm. It would not hurt to get calluses. The protagonist smiled. Clenching his hand into a fist, Chuck noted that although he did not see the point in this return, he had a chance. A red aura emanated from the man. Blue particles appeared next to it. The sorcerer noticed that blue energy was hovering around him. Chuck came to a tall building in the middle of the night. Entering it, the man greeted him. There was a smile on his face. Holding a bag in his hand, the protagonist said that he brought payment for the night's lodging. He took a spear out of the bag and said that he received a discount from his merchant on such a purse, which costs more than $1 million. Looking at the items, Jack noted that these were goblin lips and blood serum. Holding the fangs of the monsters in his hands, the man said that this would be enough for a couple of days. In the Guild of Magicians, they would not give him a dime for this. They are greedy. Looking at Chuck, Jack said that he had talent. He remembered the first time he met the protagonist and said that when an out-of-class boy approached him and offered to pay for the rent with the fruits of the hunt, he agreed, and did not expect that he would live long. Puzzled, Chuck listened, however, that for 2 weeks now he has been regularly bringing him payment after a successful hunt. That is why he says that the protagonist is talented. The protagonist frowned at the words that usually out-of-class ones barely make ends meet. Looking after Chuck, Jack said that with his talent, he could well become like Xion. Climbing the stairs, the enraged protagonist said that he was tired. He clenched his hand into a fist. Entering the room, the protagonist thought that the word talented did not suit him at all. Frowning, Chuck emphasized the fact that in his entire past life he had only grown to a C-rank mercenary. The protagonist began to examine the window with characteristics. Sitting on the bed, Chuck listed all his abilities and noted that all of these were techniques that he had learned in his past life. Frowning, the protagonist emphasized that these were the mechanics of area. If he remembered the technique, then he could practice it. At least this was something to start with. The enraged protagonist added that these were only second-level combat techniques. Chuck imagined a muscular man holding him down and emphasized that these techniques would not get him far. His gaze fell on the heavenly concentration technique, and the protagonist noted that this technique was his only hope, the only first-level technique. But this technique also had its limits. It did not provide endless energy. Sitting on the bed, Chuck frowned. He was enveloped in white energy, and noted that he needed more complex martial arts techniques. The next day, someone on the first floor called the protagonist. A girl stood behind Chuck and asked if he was hunting again. She asked him seriously why he was doing this, noting that he was only risking his life in vain, and the plot introduced us to the daughter of the innkeeper Jack, Mia. Turning around, the protagonist replied that he was an alien there. This was his only way to earn money. Pointing her finger at him, Mia asked if he was a fool and why not look for a regular job, even if he was an alien. Sighing, Mia gave an example of the protagonist working at their inn, noting that Jack spoke well of him. Shaking his head, Chuck replied that this job was not suitable for him, because he could neither cook nor clean. Looking at him, Mia said that after all, the trade of an inn worker is not as risky as risking your neck every day on a hunt. A smile appeared on the protagonist's face. He began to leave, saying that he would be back for dinner. The protagonist remembered how he washed the floors and thought that this had already happened. He lived the life of an opportunist, unable to say no to anyone. There was a smile on his face. Walking towards the forest, Chuck added that it was possible to live like that, however, he would not waste his life on it. The protagonist imagined a beetle crawling towards the light, and added that this time he would do everything to take possession of what had always made him envious. The protagonist, with a serious look, said that he would do everything for this. He would definitely succeed in this life. The bell began to ring loudly. The protagonist went out to the city square. Raising his head, Chuck thought that this was the midday bell. New aliens would appear on the square. A portal began to open in front of him. A girl appeared in front of him. Watching her, the protagonist wondered if she was a girl and if she studied martial arts. Sighing, the protagonist assumed that she was confused. Nothing surprising, but the local bandits would immediately notice her by her behavior. The bandits gave her a flask. Chuck's face was dumbfounded. He turned away and thought that it did not concern him. The protagonist bumped into a man. He looked up. A huge man was standing in front of him. He said with an enraged look that the protagonist broke his collarbone. The man hit Chuck in the face. The protagonist flew to the side. The villagers watched this. Holding his hands in front of him, the bandit said that there was no need to worry. This impudent man broke his collarbone and got what he deserved. He said with an enraged look that he would teach him a lesson, and Chuck would pay him compensation. There was nothing to see. The people began to disperse. The stranger noticed him and asked what he had there, to which he received the answer that the main character had broken his collarbone and would now pay for it. Frowning, Chuck thought that they were also one gang. He was unlucky, although his punch was SOSO, but he still knew how to fight. Looking at the man, the protagonist came to the conclusion that this brute was a third-class hand-to-hand combat practitioner. Chuck imagined how people raised their level and noted that hand-to-hand combat skills were divided into several classes. Third-class martial artists were the lowest and were achieved in the shortest possible time even with little martial arts skills, but he had not yet reached even the third class. Standing on one knee, Chuck emphasized the fact that this was dangerous. Frowning, the protagonist thought that he could not win alone, and the local Zenavisa were indifferent to strangers. No one would help him. Looking at the girl, the protagonist cried out that this water should not be drunk, because it contained paralysis poison. The girl suddenly stopped. The enraged protagonist thought that she was his age, and he did not know if she would be of any use. But it seemed as if she had been summoned from Urim. At least she should be able to do something. The girl began to pour water on the ground. The bandit walked towards Chuck and said that he was such a decent-looking guy, but he behaved so ugly, there would be buyers for him among the perverted nobility. The man swung his leg. Frowning, the protagonist thought that he could not leave it like this. The bandit should get what he deserved. With a lightning-fast jump, Chuck dodged the blow. The bandit noticed how the protagonist swung his hand. The protagonist hit him in the ribs with his elbow. The dumbfounded guys called out to their leader. Chuck began to beat him. The man backed away. Standing opposite, he began to laugh and asked if the protagonist had learned to fight. He noted with a satisfied look that this would not stop him. Holding his fist in front of him, the protagonist thought that it was as if he was made of stone. He obviously knew some defensive techniques. With his childish weight and strength, he would not be able to defeat him. The second guy stretched out his hand and cried out that the guards in Zenavisa, of course, were idiots. But they couldn't do something like that there in broad daylight. They would come for the noise. Beads of sweat were running down Chuck's face. The girl watched him in surprise. The bandit swung his fist. While the protagonist reasoned that his fists were of little use, he should try with a spear. The protagonist took a spear out of his bag. The girl approached him and asked him to repeat what he told her. There was a smile on her face. The bandit ran towards them. The stranger extended her hand to the man's fist. The bandit flew up from the powerful magical blow. Holding her hand in front of her, the girl declared that this serf dared to interrupt her and did not know his place. The bandits lay in a heap unconscious. Stunned, Chuck wondered who this girl was, noting that it was a palm strike with a charge of spiritual energy. This is not the second, and not even the first class of hand-to-hand combat. Examining the girl, the protagonist came to the conclusion that she was a master, which meant that she was a minor heavenly demon, Chloe. The girl, with a smile on her face, asked her to tell him what this place was. The protagonist imagined a person shrouded in a fiery aura and thought that the cult of the heavenly demon was representatives of an unorthodox sect that worshipped power and strength. Chloe appeared in his imagination, and Chuck added that the strongest among them always becomes the leader. The heavenly demon, his offspring, are called young leaders. Looking at the girl's back, the protagonist said that she was an alien from Urim, and a young leader, a minor heavenly demon. Frowning, Chuck emphasized the fact that Chloe possessed master-level techniques, and when she came to area, she soon became famous, his peer who reached heights as soon as he crossed the threshold. Naturally, he did not even dream of such a thing. The protagonist was shocked. Sitting on the bed, Chloe introduced herself and said that she was 13 years old. Frowning, Chuck said his name and age. Holding her chin, Chloe said that the protagonist said something interesting. She was intrigued by this world area. It was completely different from her home world. Looking at Chuck, she clarified if there was a cult of the heavenly demon there. Grinning, the girl laughed and said that everything was clear to her. Her gaze was empty. Chloe remembered how the protagonist began to shout at her to warn her. The confused protagonist stood in front of her. Chloe laughed and asked how Chuck dared to address her as you. Bowing his head, the protagonist apologized, noting that he did not know that she was the young leader. Chloe looked at him with a smile, while Chuck thought that he could not believe that he had to bow down to a 13-year-old. The girl had a smile on her face. She pointed her finger at the protagonist, and noted that she had seen him fight and had not seen anything like this for a long time. The protagonist bit his lip. Imagining a fight, Chloe said that Chuck was clumsy. His moves were no good, and their execution was even worse, after which she asked who taught him such clumsy moves. The furious protagonist asked to let him ask first what she was getting at. Chloe extended her hand and said that she would teach him martial arts. The protagonist shuddered at what he heard. Chloe crossed her arms and pointed out that if Chuck were to learn from her, At least he wouldn't be so clumsy. The girl pointed at him and said that she would teach him martial arts, on one condition. Chuck looked puzzled. Chloe stood in front of him and said that the only condition was that the protagonist be her friend. The protagonist was shocked by what she heard. Chloe looked up at the sky and called out to her father. She said with an excited look that she wanted to have a friend. The man stood in front of her and asked who told her about such a thing. Chloe held a book in front of her and told him that she had read in it. It said that with a friend no trouble is scary. The girl listened with a smile that it was true, but only for mortals. The enraged man crossed his arms and shouted that Chloe was the heir to the throne and would one day be the commander of countless demon hordes. The ruler did not need friends, and the plot introduced us to the leader of the heavenly demon cult, Heavenly Demon, Hank. Looking at his daughter, he shouted that she should practice martial arts instead of reading nonsense. Chloe ran away from him with a sad look. Frowning, Hank thought that he had to say that. Looking at the corpses on the ground, he noticed that he was worried. Noticing one of the corpses, Hank began to think that he called in fighters for training, and although they were all amateurs, there were 50 of them and his 10-year-old daughter dealt with them with ease. Hank remembered how Chloe fought and thought that she was his daughter, but she was so strong that it even scared him. He said with a serious expression that he hoped the lot would not fall. The joyful girl asked him to be her friend with a smile. The protagonist imagined how Chloe was sitting next to Hank as a baby and thought that as the heir to the cult of the Heavenly Demon, she grew up under constant attention and great expectations were placed on her. Her training began almost from the cradle, and she had no time to make friends at all. Pointing at himself, the protagonist asked why him, and Chloe clarified whether he was friends with his peers. They shook hands. The girl with a satisfied expression declared that she called the protagonist her friend. She hugged Chuck, while he thought that he was actually 27, and he became friends with a girl who was 13. Chloe stood in the middle of the room and told him that she would teach him the purple way. The girl imagined a man wrapped in mana holding a blade and told him that the way of the purple dawn is an art created by an unorthodox sect of demons. The energy when performing it is purple. Looking at Chloe's furious face, Chuck noted that he thought she would teach him the martial arts of the heavenly demons. Approaching the protagonist's face, the girl asked a question, "Don't friends address each other as you?" Stunned, Chuck accepted her request. A smile appeared on the girl's face. Closing her eyes, she said that she cannot teach him the way of the heavenly demon. This art school is only for the heavenly demon and his heirs. He will like the way of the purple dawn. It is a very good fighting art. Smiling, Chloe asked if the protagonist agrees. Touching the abrasion on his face, Chuck thought that a month had passed since then. Standing over the goblin's corpse, the protagonist noted that an incredible coincidence had brought him together with Chloe, and she had taught him the way of the purple dawn. There were many monster corpses lying under his feet. Chuck thoughtfully thought that he was now somewhere between a second and first grade martial artist, which was a huge achievement compared to his previous life. Enraged, Chuck imagined Chloe saying that she was his teacher, and that was all he had achieved in a month. He really was untalented. The huge monster swung his hand, while the protagonist looked away and thought that he needed to collect everything valuable from the goblins. The protagonist was suddenly taken aback. He dodged the monster's attack. Holding the spear in front of him, Chuck thought that if he hadn't reacted, his head would have rolled. Looking at the monster, the protagonist wondered where the orc came from. He shifted his gaze. The protagonist looked at the trees. His gaze fell on the forest on the other side. Standing in front of the monster, Chuck wondered if he was sure he was alone. A magical blow hit the monster's chest. Its body was pierced through. The orc fell to the ground. Smiling, the protagonist thought that killing one orc was a piece of cake for him. Crouching in front of the corpse, the protagonist thought that it was strange, because orcs were not found in this area. He was surprised when he heard a voice behind him that Chuck was a good fighter for his age. The guy was walking towards him. Folding his arms, the guy introduced himself as Ralph. In the capital he is known as the Orchid Sword. The protagonist noticed the blade on Ralph's belt and asked what he needed. Pointing his finger at the corpse of the monster, the guy said that there was some problem related to this orc. Sunlight enveloped the settlement. The man was squatting and asked why they needed this goldfinch, and we were introduced to Dobby, nicknamed Monkey. Ralph pointed his hand at the protagonist and asked not to look, that he was small. He saw his skill with his own eyes. Chuck would be very useful to them. Liam put his hand behind his cloak and said that since Ralph said so, he believed him. The girl extended her hand and introduced herself as Rachel, noting that she studied magic at the Velas school. With a smile on her face, she asked if the protagonist knew what job he would be given. She introduced many monsters and told that a tribe of orcs had recently set up camp near the city. They were attacking villages, travelers. Ralph said with a satisfied look that the mercenary guild had set a reward of 20 million eras for the one who dispatched the entire orc gang to the next world. Together with the trophies it would come to about 35 million eras. Standing in front of the guys, Chuck clarified how they would divide it, to which he received the answer that the reward would be divided 5 ways. The protagonist with a thoughtful look came to the conclusion that he would receive about 7 million eras. Such a quest does not happen often. He imagined the enraged images of people and wondered if he could trust them. There was a smile on Ralph's face. Chuck held his chin and replied that he agreed with that. Ralph grabbed him by the shoulders and cried out that the protagonist made the right choice. With him this matter would be much easier for them. Chuck removed his hand from his shoulder and thanked him for the praise. His gaze fell on the two men and the protagonist clarified who they were. Looking at the boys, Ralph said that they were just porters, classless. He looked at the men and said that he was from Mirim. Rachel gave money to one of the porters while Ralph said that they would carry their gear. They were entitled to a small fee for this. Ralph stood next to Chuck and said that they were of no interest. The protagonist listened with a serious face, that he could only speak, and they would follow him. The embittered protagonist agreed with his words. Ralph had a mad smile on his face. The girl bit off an apple. They walked through the forest. Bobby with a serious face said that there would be about 50 orcs. Most likely, the fight would only be with 30 of them. He grinned and noted that orcs were stupid and clumsy creatures. This was an easy job, you just need to catch them by surprise, kill them, and their money. Looking back, Ralph said that they would split into two groups. He introduced the groups and said that he would be with Chuck, and Bobby, Liam and Rachel together. Ralph imagined them moving through the forest and noted that they would lure the orcs out of the camp, divide and conquer. Gathering mana in her hand, Rachel said that she would use wind magic to make their scent spread throughout the forest. The orcs hated nothing more than encroachment on their territory. They would leave the camp to deal with them. Looking away, Bobby added that the orcs would fall right into their ambush. When they arrived, the witch would use her battle spells. Holding a flare in his hand, Bobby noted that he and the little warrior would light this flare to lure the rest of the orcs. He imagined a map for fighting monsters and added that in this way they would divide the orcs into two fronts and deal with them. Chuck stood quietly and thought that the plan was normal. Although simple, it would be better to prepare traps, but they did not have time and there were not many of them. Looking at the skull impaled on the tree, Ralph said that they were already close to their territory. Examining the skull, he said that they would split up there. The guys walked through the forest. The porter was exhausted. Turning around, Chuck thought that they had been walking for half a day. For an out-of-class person it was probably hard. The man tried to catch his breath. Looking at him, the protagonist asked his name. The tired porter answered that his name was Brass. Chuck with a serious look said that he was not sure that he could protect him when the fight with the orcs began. Watching Brass, the protagonist asked him to choose whether he would go further or run away. Turning his gaze to Ralph, the protagonist noted that he was definitely not going to protect the out-of-class person. Exhausted Brass said that he could not run away. The protagonist remembered how he was beaten and thought that Brass knew what the guild would do to him if he tried to escape. Chuck stood still and asked him to defend himself by any means necessary. Grinning, Ralph assumed that they were there. They stopped. The guy said that fortunately they did not come across any of their patrols. In the distance there was a fence. This was the orc camp. Taking items from the bag, Chuck asked Ralph to wait and not to light the flare. Spreading his arms, the guy asked where the protagonist got the immense bag. He looked closely and clarified that the protagonist got it. Pouring water on the ground, Chuck replied that it was a tub of water. You need to replace the dirt and smear yourself to mask their smell. Ralph watched as the protagonist smeared himself with mud and noted that it was inventive. His knowledge surprised him. Looking up, Chuck said that it was Ralph's turn. A red stream of smoke rose from the forest. The orcs turned their attention to it. Sitting in front of the rocket, Ralph said that he had an idea, then suggested sending the porter ahead. He said with a satisfied look that it would be more convenient for them to send him so that Brass would distract the orcs' attention, and they would attack them from behind. The man was taken aback by what he heard. He looked at Ralph and said that the orcs would kill him. The guy with a mad look said that if Brass did not carry out the order, he would definitely kill him. Brass shuddered with fear. Chuck bit his lip in anger. He got to his feet. The protagonist with a serious look said that he would go first. Ralph with a satisfied look agreed with this. A horde of orcs was walking through the forest. The protagonist attacked them from the bushes. He cut off the monster's head. Blood sprayed from Chuck's spear. He killed another orc and noted that now there were 11 left. Swinging his spear, the protagonist wondered if he could handle them all. The protagonist said with a serious expression that he had expressed himself incorrectly, and that he could handle them. Chuck imagined a dumbfounded Brass and mentally asked why he had pitted the porter, noting that it was pointless to be merciful, but it could be sympathy. The protagonist jumped off the ground. He imagined his face next to Brass and came to the conclusion that they were not friends. However, they were both classless. That was enough. The orcs were watching Chuck closely. He ran at the monsters with the thought that whoever was stronger was the law. He understood that this was the rule, very straightforward and cruel. The protagonist remembered Chloe watching him and saying that no matter how many times she explained it to him, he still couldn't do it. Crossing her arms, Chloe asked him to be grateful for his steadfastness and to remember every word and movement. Smiling, the guy asked him to remember how to hold the spear. The main character ran towards the monsters and thought that he needed to hit from a distance. He opened his mouth and started repeating it out loud. Chuck dealt a powerful blow to the orcs. 3 monsters flew away from him. Ralph, on the other side, was cutting down the monsters. The orc swung his club at Brass. He was shaking with fear. Chuck pierced the orc's chest, thus saving the man. There was a smile on his face. They killed all the orcs in the forest. Having cut off the orc's ear, the man said that that was it. He squatted and said that there were 13 killed in total. Turning around, Ralph said that they could not have done it without him. He took their ears to prove how many they killed. The other group must have already dealt with the rest. The man threw the bag and shouted to the porter to take it and not to forget anything. He stood in front of the guy and said that it was time to go, their companions would be found. Brass looked at him seriously. Passing by the protagonist, he thanked him. The porter went into the forest. The protagonist watched him closely. Ralph walked towards the monkey and asked how everything went. Leaning on his knee, Dobby answered that they had closed them a long time ago, asking why they were in the mud, whether they had had a hard time, and that they didn't look very good. The man was sweating as he explained that everything had gone smoothly, the little warrior had helped him well, and they had done a clean job. Liam frowned. Smiling, Ralph said that for them, the real battle would begin now. The boy looked worried. A hand reached out from the darkness. Rachel looked in surprise at the dagger in her chest. Blood gushed from the wound. Liam extended his hand. Ralph swung his sword. The protagonist quickly swung his spear. The man glared at him and ordered him not to interfere. The protagonist remembered how the boss, with an angry look, shouted that the out-of-class kid should be faster, or he wouldn't pay. He imagined the sun shining on the city. The boy was carrying a sack on his shoulder and asking for forgiveness. Chuck looked at the crowd in surprise. Turning around, the man asked what he was looking at. Had he never seen an execution or something? The protagonist remembered how, crossing his arms, he said that a particularly dangerous criminal, they say, a mercenary from Murim. Looking at the man in the guillotine, the man said that he went on a job with his partners, and then killed them all to take the entire reward. They caught him red-handed, so now he will lose his head. The protagonist looked at the criminal with alarm, answering that it is clear. He looked at the joyful opponent with a grin. Extending the sword, Ralph said that he did not expect that his reaction was so fast. The guy frowned, listening to what he seemed to know in advance, and thought that of course he knew. He saw his execution in a past life. Remembering how he flew after the enemy, Chuck thought about the fact that although 13 years had passed, he remembered him well. It was the first time in his life when he was present at an execution. Frowning, the man said that nothing could be done. He saw the boy fight with orcs. He pushed off the ground and said that he had to give him credit. He was a good fighter. Ralph rushed forward and shouted that, however, he was still stronger. The protagonist looked furiously, thinking that this was a second-class fighter. He was only on the way between third and second class, and this was a very big difference. But he should not despair. Extending his spear, the protagonist thought that he was doing an excellent job of reading his movements. Now he was clearly preparing for a chopping blow. He extended the tip of the weapon. Looking at the running opponent, the guy decided that he should stop him on the approach with a spear. The man screamed from a blow to the stomach. Grinning, Chuck clarified whether he was saying that he was stronger, and thought that his past life experience and the lessons of the little demon were helping him a lot. Lowering his head, Ralph replied that this was not bad. He coughed up blood and screamed that only how much more he could do. Putting his hand to his mouth, the man asked what it was. Remembering how he held the poison in his hand, the protagonist said that he added a long-acting poison to the dirt he was covered in. It was not fatal, since it did not get into his stomach. The opponent raised his sword in panic, listening to his hands shaking, and he would not cope even with a weaker opponent. Pushing off the ground, the protagonist asked what he would do. The man ran forward. The dumbfounded guy held a spear. Ralph held the sword in front of Brass. Grinning, he said that one move and he would kill him. Chuck looked ahead in fear. The opponent smiled madly, thinking that he did care about this outcast, which meant he had a soft-hearted fool. The man watched the boy hold the weapon and thought that he would have no choice. Taken aback, the protagonist wondered if he was serious. The protagonist walked slowly towards him, thinking that he thought that taking a hostage would save him. Frowning, he thought that he had been a mercenary for so many years, the only reason to help Brass. The guy remembered the man's frightened face and his own. Chuck confidently lowered his eyebrows. Ralph smiled with a mad look. Grinning, the protagonist thought that it was not the time to reason. After the battle with the orcs, he was exhausted. Lost in thought, the protagonist thought that if it were not for this circumstance, he would have stabbed him before he had time to come to his senses. But he can't. Even if he tries with his last strength, it can end very badly. He watched as Dobby kicked his opponent away, thinking that he can't count on him not recovering from the poison soon. If the monkey is defeated, then he will have to fight 2 opponents. Frowning, the guy decided that he needs to act. He has no choice. Brass was sweating in fear. He grabbed his opponent's leg. Ralph coughed up blood from the pain. Chuck looked at him in shock. The man was taken aback, asking how he dared to leave him alone. The porter's eyes widened from the blow. Ralph grinned and said that he should have listened to him. He stuck his sword into his opponent's side. Looking at the furious protagonist, the man asked him to stop and listen. The protagonist lowered his spear. Dobby stood next to the defeated opponent. The guy looked away at the corpse. Blood spurted from Brass's mouth. Having pierced the enemy's body with a spear, Chuck told us that Ralph and Liam were dead. He and Dobby went to the mercenary guild and, having received a reward for the orcs, divided their proceeds and trophies between the two of them. Chloe smiled happily and said that he had come. The protagonist entered the room and answered that he was at work. The protagonist fell onto the bed. He spread his arms out to the sides, thinking that if only he had a little more strength, he could have saved Brass. Frowning, the girl thought that the curse, she certainly didn't want to do something in this life that would make him feel guilty for the rest of his days. Chloe crossed her arms and said that he killed a man. Touching his cheek, she said that she could smell blood. Chuck covered his face with his hand and said that there was a second-class fighter who attacked him, and therefore he had no choice. Sitting on the edge of the bed, his girlfriend said that he was hiding something else. The guy looked at her seriously and said that he should tell her what else he had kept silent about. The protagonist looked at him worriedly. Chloe sat on the bed, looking at her comrade. The protagonist's mouth dropped open as he said that it was a very strange question, and then asked what he could be hiding, and whether she thought someone like him couldn't defeat a level 2 fighter. The brunette waved her hand as she said that it was not at all, and that he was learning the way of the Violet Dawn, so it was quite achievable. The girl looked ahead carefully as she added that he was special. She imagined herself walking down the street as she said that she wandered around the city and observed, trying to understand what kind of world this was. Chloe watched a homeless man from around the corner as she said that she noticed a lot, and that she quickly realized what the life of a classless person was like. A scruffy man ate spoiled food as she summed up that most were worthless. The brunette looked away haughtily. She imagined someone swiping at the animal when she said she knew that humans usually killed insects with ease, while not everyone was capable of killing a small animal, and that it required crossing a certain line in oneself. The protagonist glanced at the girl standing next to him. The boy headed towards the goblins when Chloe said that the first thing he did on the first day of his summoning was go hunting in the forest. Chuck was shown in profile when he asked if it was really that unusual, adding that he wouldn't have survived otherwise. The brunette's mouth dropped open when he answered that it made sense, and then asked if he really thought that other classless lived like this just because they didn't understand it. She imagined a man with a sword in front of a small animal when she said that they understand, but do not dare to end someone's life, and that in addition to the fact that he is out of class, he is also a teenager, summing up that something does not add up there, and that she is getting to this. The protagonist sat with his arms folded in front of him when he answered that he knows how to adapt. The girl crossed her arms over her chest when she added that he also knows how to evade direct questions, and that then she will tell him her other suspicion. Then she was asked about whether there really is more. Chloe stood in front of the protagonist when she reminded him that he has no abilities. The boy was lying on the bed when the brunette said that, given this fact, even if she teaches him, he cannot learn more than a third of the material. Chuck held a spear in front of himself when the girl explained that she was interested in the fact that no more than 3 weeks have passed since he hunted with a weapon, and his skill is already quite good. Chloe looked thoughtful as she said that usually a beginner's weakest point was their lack of control over their internal energy and footwork, but she didn't notice any of those common mistakes with him. The room was shown from above as the brunette asked how someone with no abilities could master the spear so well in just 3 weeks. The protagonist was sitting in front of her as she asked who he was. Their feet were next to each other. The protagonist looked forward, his mouth slightly open as he replied that he didn't understand what she was talking about. Chloe's gaze was menacing as she said, calling him a friend, that she didn't like being lied to. The girl stood in front of Chuck. The brunette was sitting on the bed, looking ahead, when he answered that everyone has their own personal things. The boy opened his palm, lowering his hand, when he asked if it wasn't evil to pry into someone else's personal life, and that she really thought that friends did that. Chloe stood silently straight. The door was shown when she said that it meant he had secrets, and that everyone had them, including her. The main character looked at the girl, who offered to tell him her secret in exchange for his, to which he replied that he didn't need her secrets. The brunette's face sweated as she said that he was upping the ante and that in that case she would tell him her secret and also teach him an incredibly powerful move, adding that he could choose the art of wielding a spear or the art of moving during a fight. The protagonist looked down as he laughed, answering that the cruel irony was that he did not have the ability to fully master her teachings, nor did he have the inner energy to fully execute them. Chloe looked at him, crossing her arms. Her mouth opened wide as she exclaimed that she would give him a quarter of her energy. Chuck looked shocked. The brunette stood in front of him when he asked her again, then she explained that she was very curious. The protagonist stared ahead as the girl added that he was her only friend and that she wanted to know everything about him, and what secrets he was keeping. Chloe looked calm when she summed up that this is how she sees friendship between people, and then asked if it was enough. There was a closet in the corner of the room. The protagonist was sitting on the bed in front of her when he asked her to promise something, then she asked what exactly. The girl looked intently ahead when he asked her to promise that she would not kill him if he was honest with her, then she asked why, since he was her friend. The brunette put her hands behind her head when she exclaimed that it meant they had decided everything, and that since she had promised, she would be the first to tell him her secret. Chloe let her hair down when she revealed that she was a girl. Chuck opened his mouth wide. The brunette touched a strand of her hair when she asked what was surprising him, explaining that it was necessary for the sect, and that only a man can become the leader of the heavenly demon sect, so her father said that she should live as a boy. The shocked protagonist sat in front of her. The girl looked ahead when she added that this is why, even after getting there, she continued to play this role, and that this is her secret, and now he must reveal his. The brunette looked at the boy sitting in front of her, who asked for some time, as he needed to think about everything. The protagonist was on his bed when he said that, first of all, tomorrow they need to move to different rooms, then she asked why. Chuck threw his head back. His lips were closed. He looked at Chloe seriously when he said that he was returned. The girl's pupils narrowed greatly. The stars were shining above the houses when she asked what kind of nonsense this was. The wooden ceiling was shown when the girlfriend asked if this meant that he died, and then returned to the past. They were sitting opposite each other when the brunette said that it was unbelievable, but she believed him, because it explained a lot. Chloe looked closely at the protagonist when she said that if they were in another world, she would not believe it, but in this area, anything can happen. The protagonist looked serious when she asked why he assumed that she would want to kill him. Adult Chuck inside the boy opened his mouth when he answered that he had incarnated into the body of a 14-year-old teenager, but his real age was 27. The guys looked at each other when the protagonist asked if she was not offended that he lied to her about his age, and because she thought she was seeing a peer in front of her, to which she replied that she was not. The surprised protagonist looked at his girlfriend. He remembered her appearing in front of him when the girl said that she was the one who approached him first and offered to teach him martial arts. The brunette extended her hand to him when she reminded him that she was the one who initiated the friendship. Chloe smiled widely when she summed up that he had not lied to her, he had simply agreed. Chuck looked shocked when his friend said that for her it was not a reason to kill him, and especially it did not question their friendship. She imagined them eating together when she added that she had spent 3 weeks with him, and that for her he was a friend. The girl put her hands on her knees, looking forward when she said that this was all and that she hoped that he was satisfied. The protagonist's mouth fell open. He pursed his lips, and then thanked her. The adult protagonist sat in front of his friend when he thanked her again. Chloe pointed at him as she said what else she wanted to say, that she sympathized with how small the level he had achieved in his past life was. A frustrated boy sat in front of her, as she added that she had more questions for him, but she would ask them later. A satisfied brunette stood in front of Chuck as she exclaimed that she was now going to transfer a quarter of her internal energy to him. Sweat appeared on the protagonist's face. A muscular man was shown as it was explained that chi energy is stored by martial artists for use in combat. A man punched a tree trunk as it was explained that it gives superpowers. Someone sat cross-legged as it was explained that martial artists gradually increase their energy potential through concentration techniques, and that they usually work on it throughout their lives, reaching incredible potential over the years, and that this is the basis of a fighter's power. The boys were sitting on the bed when the girl said that his blood vessels were polluted. Chloe looked down sadly when she added that they were very polluted. Then it was explained that the transfer of energy potential was a rare phenomenon. She touched the neck of the frightened boy when she said that nothing could be done about it, and that at 14 it was too late to start learning martial arts, adding that everything was ready, and that now she would transfer a quarter of her chi energy to him. The brunette smiled when she said that how much he would hold in himself depended only on him, and then advised him to use the path of the purple dawn. She put her hand on his back. The protagonist clenched his teeth. His palm was open. The girl looked at her hand when she asked what he was thinking about. The boy's body was enveloped in a purple aura. There was a lump of energy in his stomach as he wondered if it was only a quarter of her chi, and then realized it was much more than he had managed to store in his past life. Sweat was pouring down their faces as the brunette asked how much he had retained, to which he replied that it was about half. A human silhouette was shown as she asked him again and asked him not to be upset, explaining that the rest of the energy would dissipate along his meridians. Chuck looked at his friend with concern as she advised him to use the violet dawn path, explaining that it would take all that energy into his body. Chloe was lying on the bed tired. When she was asked what was wrong with her, then she asked her friend not to fuss, saying that she was just a little tired. The naked protagonist sat next to her. His mouth was slightly open as he wondered why she was doing this for him. The girl looked up when she answered that it was because they were friends. The ceiling was shown when she asked him not to worry, because nothing was required of him, adding that she just wanted to do it. The brunette's hair was disheveled when she thought about how it was all just for her sake. The protagonist looked at her friend with concern when she said that now she would teach him another technique, as she promised, or rather, the technique of wielding a spear. Then he asked about whether she would really give him this as well. Chuck looked down attentively when Chloe explained that she thought that the technique of the Spear King, the bearer of the great spear of the ninth sky, would suit him, and that with his abilities it would be difficult for him to learn it, so she would try to make it more primitive. The brunette was lying next to him when she asked him not to make her repeat that she was doing this only for herself, or rather, for her first friend in her life. The boy looked surprised when she added that she could not allow him to perish this time, having lived only 13 years. He looked down guiltily when she mentioned the girl's name. She slapped him across the face, exclaiming that friends do not bow to each other when he thanked her. The protagonist touched a sore spot when he asked her why she thought that, and what was wrong with bowing. Chloe pulled him close, saying she didn't like it. They looked into each other's eyes when the girl said they should do something more enjoyable. Then he asked her again. The brunette watched the protagonist when she asked him to tell her about his past life. Chuck looked at his friend, asking again when she asked him what he knew about her back then. The girl turned her back when the protagonist told him that he was trying to survive and knew about her only through rumors, and that they said she was at the very top of area, incomparable in strength. Their faces were close when Chloe said it was not surprising, because it was her. Then the protagonist added that she left the city only a month after she appeared. The brunette looked thoughtful when the young man said that nothing was heard from her for 3 years. The girl in the cloak stood with her back turned when she suggested that she must have been traveling. Then her comrade asked her again. Chloe lowered her head, clenching her fists when she explained that she always missed freedom the most, and that in the cult there is no freedom, because everything is always under supervision and within the rules set by the leader of the cult. Chuck looked confused when he asked her again after she summed up that this is why she was called to this world and met him, her first friend. They were lying on the same bed when the girl said that she would leave in a month. There was a wooden ceiling above them when she added that she would enjoy freedom and this new world. The brunette looked at the boy with a smile, saying that when he learned the ninth heaven spear technique from her in a month, she would leave like she did in her past life, and then asked what he would do. Chloe looked ahead sadly. The protagonist was lying on his side when his girlfriend turned to him, saying that he now had a new life, and then asked how he wanted to live it. The protagonist put his hand under his head, wondering. He remembered how the warrior cursed at the servants, and how he held the weapon. The boy remembered how he brought his bent hand to his face. A memory of an adult boy standing upright was shown. An insect larva was lying on the ground. There was nothing under the ceiling when Chuck answered that he wanted to live better than the last time. The girl propped her head up with her hand when she asked if this was all. The brunette looked ahead with a smile when she asked him if he had a goal after all. The protagonist put his hand near his face when he said he didn't even know. They were lying with their knees bent when Chloe asked him to think about it and tell her later. The girl looked at her friend with admiration when she exclaimed that she remembered that she wanted to ask about his past life, and then asked him to tell her. The protagonist put his hand behind his head when he answered that there was nothing special to tell. Then she said that she knew it, and he called her a hooligan, thinking about his past life in Xenavissa, and whether he had at least one friend. The brunette smiled, closing her eyes when Chuck realized that surprisingly, just as he was her first friend in her life, she was his too. The young man lay on the bed, turning his head when it was told that the night was long. The friends were in the same bed when it was explained that they had talked about everything under the sun. Clouds were floating in the sky when a month had passed. Chloe held her hand out in front of her when she turned to the protagonist, and offered to see how much he had learned in a month. The protagonist held a spear in his hand when he thought about how it was almost time for her to leave and that after this training she would go wandering. The brunette frowned, looking ahead when he answered that he was now going to show her his full strength. The girl in the cloak stood straight when she asked about whether he had imagined it any other way and whether he really thought that with his abilities it was possible to fight at a level less than full strength. Clouds were floating in the blue sky. An enraged Chuck pointed a spear at his friend. Chloe bent 2 fingers when she said that she was giving him a head start of 20 moves, no more. The protagonist held the weapon with both hands as he thought about the number of moves and how he could use them more effectively. The girl bent her hand, clenching her fist as she said that she had figured out how to simplify the ninth heaven spear technique to his level, and that she had named it the enhanced Chuck style. The protagonist looked at her friend in horror as he asked her if she had named it after him, to which she replied that she had adapted the technique to suit him, and then wondered why she shouldn't add his name to it. Bright stars shone above the houses as the young man thought that he didn't want this. The protagonist looked ahead from under his brows, thinking that in this enhanced ninth heaven spear technique, she had combined his skill with some elements of the heartbreaking spear technique. The weapon was in his hand as he wondered if maybe that was the one to use first. The protagonist held the spear in front of him when he used the first move of the enhanced technique called Heartbreaking Death Strike. Chloe put her hand forward. The weapon appeared in front of the brunette. She easily parried it. The young man attacked her again. The girl deftly dodged. Chuck looked ahead, gritting his teeth, when he used the style of the same name. They were opposite each other when the protagonist implemented the second move, lightning splitting strike. Chloe put her hand to the side, parrying the weapon. The brunette confidently looked ahead when she said that compared to the beginning of his training, he was much better at the parry block strike move. The spear touched the blade when she added that parrying reflects the enemy's attack with an outward movement. The sword was clamped between the pikes when her friend explained that blocking is the result of a downward rotational movement blocking the enemy's weapon. The brunette held the spear in front of her when she summarized that then you need to deliver a strike that attacks the enemy. She stood in front of the confused protagonist as she said that this was the basics of using such a weapon, and then asked him if he didn't know about it before she taught him, to which he replied that he did, but he learned them himself through trial and error. Chuck looked ahead with a smile as he mentally repeated her words about him remembering to practice them every day until it became a habit, and then thanked her. The girl easily parried his attacks. She looked ahead smugly as she asked about his back, reminding him to work it to increase the power of the blow. The protagonist gritted his teeth in anger. Chloe blocked his attack with her hand as she said that it was better this way. The angry protagonist glared as he mentally cursed, wondering if she really had such a huge advantage. A red aura enveloped his palm as the boy thought about how he had already grown to the second grade of martial arts thanks to the cheap practices his girlfriend had taught him, and she was parrying all of his blows with just her right hand. There was a powerful aura around the brunette as he realized that her level was supreme martial artist. Chloe brought her hand to her face as she said that he looked hesitant, and then asked if he had already given up. The girl stood in front of Chuck. The protagonist pointed a spear at her as he asked if she thought he was giving up. His girlfriend parried his blows, looking forward. The protagonist gritted her teeth in rage. The brunette opened her palm in front of her. Her hand stretched to the side as she spoke about the final move. The tip of the spear appeared in front of Chloe's face. She opened her mouth in a half-smile. There was no one in front of Chuck. The boy felt something behind him. The girl was behind the protagonist. There was a blue sky above the boys when she said that he lost. The brunette touched her friend's shoulder when she added that he was doing well, then he asked her not to console him, answering that she blocked everything with ease, with one hand. The protagonist turned to Chloe, who said that he had good reactions, and that despite the limited capabilities of his chi, she was sure that he was born for martial arts, because he felt how she appeared from behind, even if he could not strike. She remembered how Chuck opened his eye wide, summing up that when a person feels what he cannot see, this in itself can already be called a superpower. Sweat was pouring down the boy's face when the girl said that one day he will bring it to such a level that it will give him a significant advantage over others. The brunette stood in front of him when she added that she hoped that this would happen in 10 years, then he asked her again. Chloe looked away thoughtfully as she answered affirmatively, saying that this training had been too easy. She remembered the spearhead appearing in front of her when she told him that she was satisfied with his achievements, as he demonstrated everything she had taught him, and the last move was especially impressive. The protagonist looked ahead in amazement when the girl suggested that they meet in 10 years. The protagonist looked gloomy when the friend reminded him that a month ago she asked him if he had a goal, and then asked if he had decided anything, to which he replied that he did not know yet. The brunette put her hand on her chest, standing in front of him, when she said that if so, then let her be his goal. Chuck clenched his fist. The ship sailed on the waves when she explained that a person needs a goal in life, and that a person without it is like a boat without a helmsman. Chloe's mouth dropped open, looking ahead as she asked her comrade to make it a goal to defeat her in battle in 10 years, when he replied that he couldn't, and she asked him again. The boy opened his mouth wide and exclaimed that even if he made her his goal, he still couldn't become like her. He remembered sitting in front of the warrior when he asked her not to talk about the impossible, because there was no way he could do it, adding that it was simply impossible, and that he was untalented. The tired boy was dragging a bag when the protagonist said that she had talent, and that she was a natural genius, and also that she probably still had access to elixirs and did not understand what it was like to be a nobody, concluding that it was impossible for him. The upset girl stood in front of the protagonist, who shouted that they had been unequal ever since their stay in area. They stood opposite each other when she replied that he was starting again, and that it was disgusting to see this self-flagellation. Chuck looked forward angrily when his girlfriend added that this is what disgusts her about him. The brunette looked down sadly when she said that he was clinging to the failures of his past life that were dragging him down. The young man looked angry when he called her a scumbag. He opened his palms when he exclaimed that he came there, nothing, and that he was called to area without abilities. The protagonist remembered standing in front of the beast when he added that he risked hunting a boar and fought with it in the slippery mud, and that he spent his entire life on the edge of survival, in poverty. Chloe looked at him seriously when she answered that now he learned from a master of mystical martial arts, and became a second-class fighter in just 3 months, and then asked if this was a second chance for him. The protagonist gritted his teeth, angry, when she added that he, meanwhile, listened to his feelings of inferiority, which he inherited from his past life, and that he had no desire to find meaning in life, because he did not even allow himself to try. The girl put her hand to the side when she asked about whether he really reasoned that if something was beyond his strength, then he would not even try, summing up that he had a new life and a chance. Then he asked her to shut up. The brunette looked ahead worriedly when she asked if he was really angry, to which his friend answered in the affirmative, saying that he was angry. Chuck stood with his fists clenched, when he laughed, saying that he could not believe that a 13-year-old girl was lecturing him. The boy looked ahead with a creepy look when he said that if she insisted, he could make her his target, and that he would practice hard, with only one goal, to fight her in 10 years and plunge a spear into her heart. Chloe waved her hand when she replied that it was not necessary, because she would die, and that she should not do that to a friend. They stood opposite each other. The guys continued to stand in this position. When the protagonist realized what was said, then the girl said that it would be a friendly sparring. The protagonist looked ahead carefully. He covered his face with his hands. Then his friend said that he was so angry, and now he was embarrassed, and that it was difficult to understand him. The brunette came closer to his face when she exclaimed that then they would do so, meeting in 10 years. Chloe smiled charmingly when she added that she would wait for their fight. Chuck looked confused, looking at her. The girl looked ahead with a smirk when she asked if he really had butterflies in his stomach, to which the young man replied that she was just moving closer, and then asked what she was even talking about, since she was still a child. The brunette approached him again when she replied that she was talking about nothing, and that he was actually a 27-year-old man with the face of a teenage boy. Then he asked her to move away from him. Chloe buried her nose in his cheek. Then the main character repeated his request, exclaiming that she was too close. Then the girlfriend asked if he really didn't like her like that. The girl imagined an attractive woman when she said that in 10 years she would grow into a seductive maiden of such beauty that he would be speechless, and that then he would not be able to tell that she was still a child. The brunette held a knapsack as she said that they would see each other in 10 years. Then it was explained that the protagonist had set 3 goals for himself, and that the first was to survive, the second was to use all the opportunities he missed in his past life, and the third was Chloe. Chuck stood up straight as he agreed with her, echoing her words. The girlfriend looked back contentedly as she asked him to cherish his life. The dark-haired boy smiled as he replied that he would definitely do so. Her foot left the ground. The protagonist took a step forward. The comrades walked in different directions. Behind the man was a skeleton as the protagonist exclaimed that he had 3 chances he should not miss in this life, including the skeletal enhancement surgery and the heavenly focus technique. A 3-story building was shown as the boy added that the last one was the tournament for the extracurriculars. Chuck stared ahead intently as he explained that Xenavisa often held various tournaments, and that there was one that he could participate in as a classless. The dark-haired man flexed his arms when he noticed that the boy had also come to the tournament, and then advised him to give up immediately, since he himself was a level 3 fighter. The brunette clenched his fist in front of him as he thought about how it had been 10 months since Chloe had left, and how in that time he had grown to level 1 in martial arts, and that victory had come to him with great ease, as he had no equal among the classless. His hand reached for the red pill when it was explained that the prize in the tournament was a sacred elixir of power that increased the potential of Chi energy. The boy was enveloped in a purple aura as he stated that he had taken the potion right away and that the sacred elixir of power was a huge boost to his energy potential, even though it was given to him by his friend. The protagonist looked down thoughtfully, realizing that he had now gotten everything he wanted from the city of Xenavis and that there was only one thing left. Tall buildings were shown as someone spoke to Hans. The bearded man opened his mouth wide. The protagonist was walking towards him as he said that he heard about his victory in the tournament, congratulating him, and the boy thanked him. Chuck looked ahead as he replied that he came to say goodbye after Hans asked why he had come. The bearded man looked up as he said that he knew it. He touched the boy's shoulder when he said that the little out-of-class brat had achieved everything that could be achieved in Xenavisa and that he was happy for him. Then the protagonist replied that it was all thanks to him. The protagonist looked ahead with a smile when Hans said that the outside world was dangerous, but he would definitely cope, because the smart ones always survive longer than others. He knew that, because he was like that himself. The man had an object in his hand when he explained that it was for the boy. Chuck took the gift in his hands when he recognized it as an oversized bag, then he was warned that it was not new. The bearded man looked at the boy with a grin when he added that this one was 1.5 times more capacious than the one the boy bought from him, and that this item would come in handy. Then he was asked why he was giving him a gift. The protagonist was behind Hans, who advised him to take what they gave him, explaining that he would not be able to sell it anyway, since it was in a bad condition. The man sat down in front of the protagonist as he said that it was his parting gift, and that if he wanted to repay him so much, he should come back when he became famous and pay him 100 times more. Hans smiled as he added that he should tell everyone that he had been in debt to a merchant of the same name when he was young. Chuck stared straight ahead as he thanked him. There was no one in the tavern. Someone stepped forward. The young man looked away as he addressed the girl by name. Mia looked sad when she asked him if he was leaving. She opened her mouth wide when he asked how she knew, and the girl replied that only a blind man would not notice that he had cleaned his room for the first time in his life. Mia was sitting on the table in front of him when she asked him why he had cleaned, adding that it was her job. The protagonist looked down with warmth when he said that he knew. The girl swung her legs when she said that she knew that they, aliens from other worlds, would leave their city sooner or later anyway. The protagonist watched her when he agreed, explaining that he had to go. The brunette opened her mouth slightly when she asked if it was true. Chuck looked ahead attentively when she wished him to disappear and die a horrible death somewhere. The upset girl turned away from him. She went to her father. Jack looked ahead confused. He closed his eyes when he asked the boy not to be angry and to understand that she was young, and then remembered that he was even younger. Sweat appeared on the protagonist's forehead when he answered that. Of course, he understood everything. Then the man asked why he was so mature beyond his years, saying that it was as if his soul was much older than his body. Jack handed the boy a robe, asking him to take it. Then the protagonist asked what it was. The man imagined a warrior with a blade when he answered that he wore this cloak in his youth, when he was a knight, and that it looked unsightly, but it had warmth, magic that helped in sword fighting, so he thought he would need it. Chuck was examining the gifted robe when he thanked Jack, who said that the cloak was too big for him, and that he could have it tailored. The man put his hand on the boy's shoulder, as he added that he would go far and that he was the most capable outlier he had ever met in his establishment. Tears welled up in his eyes as he asked the boy to take care of himself. The protagonist took a step forward. He looked ahead carefully. Mia gritted her teeth. The cloaked protagonist had his back turned as she shouted his name. Chuck turned around, looking back. There was a girl standing behind him. The brunette was wiping sweat from her face, asking the boy to stop as he addressed her. They stood opposite each other as Mia apologized, then he asked her again. The protagonist looked surprised as she apologized for wishing him dead. The tired girl looked sad as she asked the boy not to die. The protagonist looked at the brunette as he asked if she had really run so far to tell him that. Chuck was in front of Mia, who exclaimed that it was a pity that he was leaving, and then asked him to live long, adding that if it was hard for him, unbearable, then he could always return to their city. The young man was shown in profile when he answered that it was fine, thanking her. The girl lowered her head forward when she said that it was strange, but one day she looked at him with completely different eyes. She squeezed the hem of her dress when she added that she did not know what was wrong with her, and that it seemed to her that she just suddenly began to like him. Mia looked forward with a smile when she finished speaking. The guys stood opposite each other when the protagonist answered that he noticed, then she said that she understood, after which he apologized to her, and the girl said that everything was fine, and asked him to just take care of himself. They stood close to each other when the protagonist told her not to be afraid, because he would not die, to which she replied that it was fine. Chuck lowered his gaze when he said goodbye to her. Mia covered her face with her hands, crying as she said goodbye to him. The city was visible behind the boy as he thought about how it took him 3 years to leave Xenovis in his past life, while it only took him a year in this one. He imagined Hans, Jack, his daughter, and Chloe as he realized that it was strange that he had no good memories from his past life, while in his new life he had received all the good that he did not have. The protagonist looked away as he thought that maybe he could return there someday. The city was shown from above as he remembered the request to take care of himself and the answer to it. The hooded stranger opened his mouth as he announced that the community of Mount Mercer welcomed him, and then asked the child what kind of ban he wanted to impose on himself. Chuck stood in front of the tall man. The boy looked forward with determination as he thought about how he only needed to become stronger for that. The girl bent her finger, looking ahead as she asked where they would meet in 10 years, adding that she did not know the geography of this world, so it was up to him. Chloe watched her friend suggest that they meet in Bihanger. The protagonist walked away from the city, thinking about how there were still 9 years until the agreed meeting, and where he should go now, deciding that he did not need to go to Bihanger yet. The protagonist touched his face, thinking about how he could become a mercenary, but it would be the same life as in the past, and he needed to hone his skills. Chuck looked away. He imagined mountain peaks when he thought of Mercer. The human body was shown when it was explained that Mercer is the Aryan god of trials and tribulations, and that through the community of priests of this god, who live on the mountain of the same name, it is possible to cast a prohibitive spell on a part of the body or on one of the senses, and also that this allows a person to increase the effectiveness of their training 100-fold. The young man turned his head towards the forest when he thought that, it seems, this mountain is somewhere nearby, and that he will go there. Clouds were floating above the thicket. A stranger in a hood was shown when the protagonist told that he arrived at Mount Mercer, received a prohibition from one of the priests, and decided to train. There was a seal on the boy's back when he added that 2 prohibitions were imposed on him, and that the first was a prohibition of lightness. The protagonist took out bread when he explained that with it he felt an unusual heaviness in his whole body, even in his equipment, and that even the immense bag and the loaf had become heavy. He was eating, sitting on the ground, when he thought about the second prohibition. The boy was in the center of the clearing. Suddenly his pupils narrowed greatly. He spat out a bunch of insects from his mouth. Chuck was leaning forward when he told about the other prohibition imposed on the sense of taste. There were pieces of bread on the ground. The boy stuck out his tongue. He was lying on the ground, thinking about how this was the worst of all, and how it was not even about the loss of taste, as such, because this was a prohibition to feel good taste, so everything he ate seemed nauseating and disgusting. The protagonist imagined bugs in a strange liquid, thinking about how even the texture of food changed, and about how instead of a piece of bread, he felt slippery, moving insects in his mouth and as if he was chewing them alive, and they secreted juice. The protagonist spread his arms out to the sides as he thought about not being able to drink or eat with this ban, and how he didn't know it would be this bad. Sweat was pouring down his face as he wondered if he should give up. There were white clouds in the sky as he thought about whether he really had to work so hard, and how he could go to Behanger and become a mercenary there, where he could quickly rise to be class. Chuck lay on the ground thinking that this was still better than his past life, and that he seemed to be trying to achieve the impossible. He imagined Chloe's disappointed look. The boy's eyes widened. He grabbed the bread. The protagonist began to eat it, thinking about insects. The boy brought the flask to his mouth, feeling the taste of feces. Clouds floated above the forest. The protagonist gritted his teeth, looking ahead as he said that he should try harder, and then cursed, mentioning Mercer. A girl appeared behind him and ordered him to be quiet. Chuck looked away, worried. A dense forest was visible behind him. High mountains were shown as a week passed. The deer turned its head to the side. The protagonist watched it with a weapon. His foot rested on the ground. The protagonist rushed towards the animal. The deer closed its eyes. A shadow fell over its face. The frightened animal opened its eyes. Chuck pointed his spear at it. The animal galloped away from the boy, laughing. The protagonist looked forward angrily. He slowly sank to the ground. The protagonist looked down in resignation as he thought about how he had only eaten bread and water all week and how he lacked strength. The boy imagined the moon above the mountain, thinking about how one must survive there with the restrictions imposed, finding shelter from the rain, making clothes for oneself and getting food, because this is also part of the test. He imagined how a man hid from a bear when he realized that it was very difficult to live there, because the temperature at night is much lower than during the day, and the predators are fast and strong. Chuck sat near the tree trunk, thinking about how the ban on lightness made any action incredibly clumsy and heavy, and how even if the hunt was successful, the ban on taste prevented him from enjoying the prey, summing up that a week had passed like this, and that his body was weak and exhausted. The legs of the young man were shown, thinking that he planned to train there for at least 2 years, and then wondered what the use of the difficulty of this training was if his own body was failing him more and more. A stone landed between his legs. The girl was watching the protagonist. The blonde waved her hand when he asked who she was. The protagonist looked ahead suspiciously when he realized that it was a girl, thinking that on Mount Mercer all the inhabitants were forbidden to harm each other, so most likely he could relax, after which he asked what her name was. The stranger pointed to her throat. She crossed her fingers in front of her. Chuck opened his mouth slightly when he assumed that she had a speech ban, and that this meant that she could not speak now. Then the girl nodded. The blonde threw him the carcass of the animal. The animal stuck out its tongue when the young man realized that it was the deer. The protagonist looked at the girl next to him, starting to object. She drew symbols on the ground with a stick, saying that she had been watching him for a couple of days, and that if he continued like this, he would die of hunger, so she decided to help. Then the protagonist realized that this was the writing of Arya. Chuck opened his mouth slightly, looking forward when he thanked her for her help, asking what she wanted, to which she answered that nothing. Then he wondered why she was doing this then. The satisfied blonde pointed to herself, explaining that she was kind. The girl smirked. The thought appeared that he met some kind of hunter, and she, oddly enough, decided to help him. She took the hero's hand. It was said that she said it out of the kindness of her heart, and subsequently, when he got into trouble, she was always there to help him out. The huntress looked away. The thought arose that he asked her name, and her answer surprised him. Looking straight ahead, Brittany introduced herself. The girl ran forward. It was said that he knew this name. In a past life he heard of her. She was famous. Her name means lightning. That's what she was called because she was fast as lightning. The hero frowned, thinking about that, but he was surprised not by the fact that he met a future celebrity. The fact is that. The huntress lowered her head. The thought arose that Brittany would die in 9 years. The guy stretched out his hand forward. It was said that she would die in the arms of the little demon Chloe. The rules of Mount Mercer appeared. The hero sat on the ground. Looking up, he wondered where it was, in some dungeon. The girl suddenly appeared next to him. The protagonist shuddered in fear and asked where she came from, to which Brittany replied that she had just arrived. Looking at the stone, Chuck thought that she was cutting the stone with her finger, and the girl said that she was worried that he had not come again, and came. She turned her head, hearing that thank you, but her level is so high, why doesn't she use telepathy to speak? To which Brittany replied that she can't. Telepathy is also included in her speech ban. The hero looked surprised when he heard this. Stretching his hand forward, he said that her hand, to which the girl replied that yes, the ban on using the left hand, half a year had already passed, and she had to choose another ban. Frowning, she added that she didn't really feel without her left hand, asked that he had a ban on the sense of lightness and taste. The protagonist chuckled, hearing that it must be hard for him. He couldn't imagine what it was like to be in this place, deprived even of the pleasure of food. Sitting in front of the girl, Chuck asked if she knew what prohibitions other adepts had imposed on themselves, to which the girl asked again that he was interested in other adepts. Brittany chuckled, hearing that well, yes, to which she replied that okay, she would introduce them, they would go. Looking straight ahead, the hero said that he would be very grateful to her. He froze in amazement, thinking about how he could catch up with her. Taking a step forward, the huntress said that she forgot, he had a prohibition on lightness, to which the protagonist replied that he wouldn't have caught up with her even without a prohibition. Looking straight ahead, the girl said that with a weighted body, he needed to work more on movement technique, he needed it more now than mastering a spear. The protagonist lowered his head and asked her what she had seen him training, and said that she should teach him the technique of movement, to which the girl replied that she might be kind, but she couldn't share with him what gave her an advantage in battle. Chuck grinned and said that he was joking, and then thought, damn. The girl took him on her shoulder. Looking away, she said that he was slow, she would carry him. Frowning, the hero asked again, to which the girl said that he should hold on tighter. They abruptly rushed forward. High mountains appeared. The sky appeared, and he heard someone say, "Ah, it's the mute." The protagonist covered his nose with his hand, hearing that, "Ah, who is this boy? It's Chuck, the new adept," and he said, "What a stench." Looking straight ahead, Scarlet asked what Chuck was doing, said that he was probably studying martial arts, what a moron. John lowered his head and asked what a fighter, great, they'll compete sometime. Looking straight ahead, Brittany said that there were only 4 of them left on the mountain after 6 months of testing, the rest couldn't stand it. The hero looked in amazement, and thought that these people. Looking at the people, he added that they would all become great masters in the future. The protagonist opened his eyes wide and thought that for now they were little known, but soon the fame of their mastery would spread throughout area, and also. Stretching his hand forward, Scarlet asked what kind of prohibitions he had, to which Chuck replied that the feelings of lightness and feelings. Frowning, she said what? But he hadn't even been here for 6 months, and already had 2 prohibitions, that is, he had voluntarily taken them from the very beginning, he wouldn't last long here. Holding a weapon in his hands, the man said that he came here to gain strength, so he shouldn't be surprised that he decided to make his life difficult. Smiling, he added that he set himself the goal of overcoming himself, at any cost. The hero looked at him in amazement, hearing that this was so, to which he replied that yes, it sounded like he sometimes instilled fear for no reason. Looking straight ahead, John said that different people gather on this mountain, and in 6 months, only the 4 of them remained. Sitting on a stump, he added that they would see how long he lasted, would look after him, to which the protagonist replied that okay. Stretching her hand forward, Scarlet asked what and she was happy, probably, now there were 2 of them such eccentrics, who took 2 prohibitions at once from the beginning of the path, a thought appeared, which means that Brittany also started with 2 prohibitions. Looking to the side, the girl said that now they met, now they will return back. Looking at them, the hero said that but she said that there were 4 of them, who survived for more than half a year, who was the 4th? The protagonist looked surprised, hearing that he wanted to meet Flam, she did not advise, to which he asked again. Looking down, the man said that he was dangerous. The guy looked ahead. Chuck froze in bewilderment. A mountain appeared, for months had passed. The hero swung his weapon, a thought appeared that as soon as he got used to the prohibitions, they became worse, the body became even heavier, and the taste of food more disgusting. Frowning, he added that, however, he felt that he was getting stronger. A notification about the skill appeared. It was said that after 4 months of training, he pumped the path of the Purple Dawn to 3 stars, despite the fact that his skeletal improvement operation was low class. This significantly accelerated his growth in martial arts. Blows flew at the tree. Pulling the weapon to the side, the protagonist thought that life on the mountain was full of difficulties. Grinning, he added that but the reward is worth the effort. Walking forward, Chuck thought about how he used the improved technique of the Spear of the Ninth Sky during the day, and at night the path of the Purple Dawn, and the excessive weight of the body, and the nauseating taste of food are always with him, but every minute spent on the mountain brings him results. The hero looked down, and thought that his bones seemed to be trying to break with every step, and his muscles were almost torn when he worked the spear. Standing still, he added that but he must endure everything, he set himself such a goal. Looking at the weapon, the protagonist thought that in fact, he had grown during this time. Taking a step forward, he added that his clothes had become too small. Grinning, the guy exclaimed in surprise. Chuck looked at him in amazement, hearing that he was good at wielding a spear. Sitting on a rock, the guy said that he hadn't met him before, nice to meet him. Smiling, he added that it was the first time he met a peer here. His name was Flam. The hero frowned upon hearing this. Looking straight ahead, the guy asked what and what his name was. The girl looked up, the thought occurred to him that he had met a real genius. The man looked ahead. The thought occurred to him that while they were working hard on the brink of despair and continuing to fight, he was moving forward by leaps and bounds and looking at them, grinning. Such was the extent of his talents. Brittany looked away. It was said that she should not meet Flam. The guy took a step forward. The thought occurred to him that otherwise he might despair. The hero looked away. Smiling, Flam asked what and why he was so tense. He was just asking his name, to which the protagonist introduced himself. Putting his hand to his face, the guy said that it was clear. Others had told him about him, hadn't they? Why hadn't he found him? Hadn't he met him? He needed a friend his age so much. Frowning, Chuck said that he should excuse him, he needed to train, to which the guy asked again. Looking away, he thought that this was a genius too, a lie. He had lived with a real genius for a year. Walking forward, the hero added that he would not waste time on this simpleton. The protagonist rolled his eyes when he heard what kind of training he had, to which he replied that it was really not clear, although, of course, it was not clear what he was talking about. Looking down, he said that with a spear. Holding his weapon in his hands, Flam said that a spear, which meant that he had not trained with a spear yet. He smirked, looking straight ahead. Chuck looked at him in amazement and thought that how could he, the greatest humiliation for a warrior, to be deprived of a weapon. His hand trembled and he added that, but instead of rage, he was overcome with surprise. How did he do it? Standing in front of him, the guy asked why he was looking at him like that. He just borrowed his spear. Let him not worry, he would return it to him. Just try it out a little. Stretching the weapon in front of him, he added that he would repeat his techniques. Asked what was wrong, how did he do it there? Smiling, the guy said that it was an improved technique of the spear of the ninth sky, Chuck style. The hero cut a tree. Suddenly, the guy began to swing the weapon. The tree was cut into several pieces. Putting his hand to his face, Flam exclaimed in surprise. Looking to the side, he said that it was a good technique for a spear. The protagonist froze in amazement and thought that he not only repeated the technique the first time, he also improved it. Could Chloe do such a thing? And then said that it was incredible. The guy grinned, looking at him. Closing his eyes, he asked if it was true. He saw, he was better than him. Chuck froze silently. Walking forward, Flam said that he could not understand why they all came here to train. No matter how they trained, he could copy any of them, and even do better. Turning his head, he added that he knew why. Why no one could be like him, why these people continued to train hard, although they would never reach his level. The hero opened his eyes wide. Lowering his head, the guy said that he asked them the same thing, but they were angry at him and drove him away. Swordplay, movement techniques, magic, he could do all this better than them. Grinning, he asked what, but why was that? Hunters appeared. The thought arose that for him, other adepts even now are shining examples of mastery. Flam looked straight ahead. The thought arose that, however, there is a real genius here who eclipses them. People climbed the mountain. The thought arose that real geniuses, how should someone like him, an ordinary person, relate to them? Chloe looked away. It was said that next to Flam he feels different than with Chloe. She openly talks about her genius, but never belittles him with her superiority. Flam smiled and asked, by the way, what prohibitions does he have? The thought arose that this bastard, he knows perfectly well how his abilities are perceived by ordinary people, and revels in his superiority over others. Looking straight ahead, he said that he should tell him his own, and he would tell him too. He was interested, to which the hero replied that he was not interested. What could be interesting there? A prohibition on modesty. Raising his hand up, the guy asked where he was going, and the spear. The protagonist simply turned around. Frowning, he shouted that he did not need it. Let him go away. Do not come near him anymore. Flam smiled and said that it was strange. He did not see that he had done anything bad to him. Asked why he was reacting so aggressively. The sky appeared. It was heard that why was he stuck here on this mountain at all? Let him go down. With his skills he could make ends meet. Suddenly the hero swung his hand. The guy parried his blow. Looking straight ahead, he asked what he had forgotten. There was a ban on hurting each other, and also. Grabbing his arm, Flam said that he was weak. What was he thinking when he tried to hit him? Standing in front of the hero, the guy asked what, or did he do it with the knowledge that he would not be able to answer him due to the ban. Said that perhaps life is so hard when you have to constantly hold back your anger. Looking straight ahead, he added that he knows that they all gossip behind his back and avoid him. Flam closed his eyes and said that he should not look at him like that. He was the one who started it, and he only gave him back his weapon. Looking away, he added that the technique he did with the spear was incredibly good, but he did it clumsily. The hero gritted his teeth, listening to how the higher the level of the technique, the more difficult it is in practice. He does not know what he hopes for with his meager abilities. He does not think that he will reach this technique above 6 stars. The man held stones on his back. He heard that he was going to tell him something. The more difficult the test he took on himself during his stay on this mountain, the better the gifts that the goddess of trials will shower him with will be. Putting his hand on his side, Flam asked that the more difficult he makes his stay here, the faster he will achieve perfection. Now he understands if he wants to become stronger. Suddenly, the girl covered his mouth. She dragged him to the side. Brittany looked ahead in amazement. The protagonist ran forward quickly. The girl opened her eyes in surprise. She clenched her teeth tightly. Chuck ran away from them. Running forward, he thought about talent. The hero bit his lips. Raising his head up, he screamed. Tears appeared in his eyes. The protagonist grabbed the weapon tightly and asked for a ban. Space appeared. Looking straight ahead, Chuck asked where he was. Suddenly a girl appeared in front of him. Smiling, the girl said that this was her abode. Glad to meet you, she was Mershur. Putting his hand to his face, the hero thought that she was a goddess, and then asked that she was Mershur. Looking at him, the goddess said that she heard his cry, let him not anger her, she will not tolerate such things anymore. Standing in front of the hero, she added that she longed for the imposition of a ban. The protagonist frowned, hearing that taste. A sign lit up on his back, it was heard that lightness. Looking straight ahead, the girl said that his burdens were unbearable, and yet he longed for new burdens. Standing in front of her, Chuck replied that he would endure everything, to which she asked, really? He looked at her in surprise, hearing that he who had been brought back from the clutches of death was bragging to her. The goddess smiled, hearing that how she knew, to which she replied that the eyes of the goddess see right through. Bones lay on the ground. It was heard that human life is short. This simple rule cannot be broken. A glow appeared around the man. It was said that those who break this rule are called gods, and the hero rolled his eyes, hearing that not a god, but a violator of the rules of the universe died, and then returned to the past, lives again. Looking at her, the protagonist asked if the fact that he broke these rules causes him any harm, to which the goddess replied that everything that exists has a beginning and an end. Raising her finger up, she added that it should be so, and yet he defied death and his soul will pay a great price for this challenge. The girl closed her eyes and said that not during life, no, his torment after death steals, hundreds of millions of hours of torment, such was the price he paid for his life. The hero looked at her in amazement. He looked down and said that he didn't care what would happen after death. Brittany looked at him in amazement. The protagonist sat near a tree, and she asked what he had done, had he added a ban to himself. Chuck grinned and answered that yes, was she really worried? The girl clenched her teeth. Sighing, she asked what? The huntress looked at him in amazement, hearing that it was warm and a peaceful sleep. The hero opened his eyes wide, hearing that he had gone crazy. At least he knew that bans on feelings and emotional comfort were the most terrible, to which he thought that he could do nothing. The protagonist sat by the fire. The thought arose that the ban on the feeling of warmth meant that Chuck could no longer warm himself. Even next to the fire, he constantly shivered from the cold. The hero opened his eyes in amazement. It was said that a ban on peaceful sleep. The monsters looked at the protagonist. The thought arose that he did so that the memories of his life on Earth, his parents, his fears and insecurities, from now on all this came to him during sleep and deprived him of peace. A sign appeared. It was heard that sleep was no longer a refuge from worries. Chuck lost peace and a sense of satisfaction from sleep. Looking straight ahead, Brittany said that he was an idiot. Frowning, she asked what he was thinking about. So, with good inclinations, he would have achieved everything soon, to which the hero replied that he had nothing. The girl looked at him in bewilderment. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist said that inclinations, he had none. Frowning, the huntress thought that it could not be, although if you think about it, despite his achievements, with the prohibitions that he had imposed before, his growth for some reason still did not accelerate. Chuck was sitting by the tree, and she added that he had so many skills, but it seemed that he really was born talentless. Who is he? An image of a guy appeared. It was heard that he set a goal for himself. He did not have enough talent to achieve it. Looking straight ahead, the hero said that he shouldn't think that he ran to take the bans just because he talked to Flam. He just showed him the next step on the way to his goal. Clenching his fist, he added that he, lacking in talent, needed to reach the level of talented people like them, and to do this, he had to do what was impossible. The girl stood silently in front of him. Brittany looked down. The protagonist frowned. The huntress smirked slightly. Leaning over, she said that it seemed like he had set himself a high goal. Looking straight ahead, the girl added that she thought she could understand him. She had set herself the goal of becoming the strongest in the world. Chuck looked at her in surprise. The girl stood in front of him. It seemed that she remembered. He asked her to teach him the technique of movement, to which the hero replied that he was just joking. Brittany closed her eyes and said that she would teach him, to which the protagonist asked again. Handing over the book, she said that this was a secret manuscript. The book appeared. It was heard that this martial art was both a mystical teaching and a movement technique. This was all that was needed to develop movement techniques. It was called The Flight of the Soul Without a Shadow. Looking at the manuscript, Chuck thought that it was incredible. This was a high art, comparable to the Path of the Purple Dawn and the Spear of the Ninth Heaven, and then asked what but why she was giving it to him. The sky appeared. It was heard that she did not know. If he died from the difficulties on this mountain, she could not do anything about it, but she did not think that he would give up. Raising her head, Brittany said that maybe she liked him, or maybe. They exchanged glances. The girl smirked slightly. The forest appeared. It was heard that it was simply because she was kind, to which the hero replied that yes, she was mocking him. a notification appeared that he would learn the technique of the flight of the soul without a shadow. The hero ran forward, using the ninth heaven spear technique. He delivered a heartbreaking, fatal blow. The boy looked at him. The protagonist gritted his teeth. Chuck flew to the side. He used the fifth move of his technique. The hero's eyes widened. The girl stood still. The hero's arm was broken. He looked at her in amazement when he heard that she was disappointed. This was all he had achieved in 10 years. Walking forward, Chloe said that she regretted ever teaching him martial arts. 10 years of effort and hard work, all for nothing. The protagonist looked at her in amazement when he heard that he no longer had to do this. She would take away everything she had taught him, and he would never see her again. She struck the hero. Turning around, the girl said that she would destroy his dantian. This was the end of his martial arts training. Chuck stretched out his hand, trying to stop her. His eyes wide open, he shouted that he should stop. He could still become a warrior. The hero suddenly woke up. He clutched his chest and wheezed. The protagonist looked at his hands and said that a dream was just a dream. Frowning, he said that it was good, to which the girl asked who Chloe was. Chuck turned around in amazement, hearing that who she was, his girlfriend. They were naughty. Looking at him, Scarlet said that a bird sang to her, that he added 2 more prohibitions, let him show, to which the hero thought, how she stinks. The protagonist's eyes widened, hearing that he really took the prohibition on a peaceful sleep, what a fool, and he thought that there was such a stench that his eyes were watering. Looking straight ahead, the girl said that he also took the prohibition on warmth, all the hardest. Yeah, he's not a tenant. Scarlet frowned and asked what was wrong with him, was he sick, to which the man replied that no, she was just standing too close. Turning around, the girl said what nonsense, she actually came to support, to which John said that she should not turn to him. The thought appeared that Scarlet, the future Archmage, and John, the ghost sword. Putting his hand to his face, the hero asked what and why they came. The girl answered with wide eyes that they came to help. Brittany covered her nose. It was heard that the mute was asking them to help him. The protagonist looked in amazement, hearing that she bought him something. Grinning, the girl said that magic scrolls. Looking at the hero, she added that they, aliens from other worlds, have access to the study of magic by reading scrolls, which is very convenient. The man raised his eyebrows, hearing that she would briefly tell him about magic. The forest appeared. Walking forward, John said that he hoped he could at least practice a little. Walking towards him, the hero replied that he would try. They stood in front of each other. Putting a finger to his temple, the protagonist thought that Scarlet taught him 4 spells. The first was clearing the mind. Looking straight ahead, he added that this spell clears the mental field, polluted and confused by nightmares. The hero's pupils appeared. Lowering his head, Chuck thought that the second spell was simple, making him stronger and faster. The hero struck. The thought occurred to him that it slightly eased the effects of his ban on lightness. Clouds appeared in the sky. The protagonist lay on the ground and thought about the third spell. Putting his hand to his chest, he said to restore stamina. Raising himself, he thought about what helps when you are exhausted. You cannot abuse it. You can take away so much energy that you die. Frowning, Chuck thought that but, in order to endure this hellish training, he must use it. Standing in front of him, John said that again. He did not endure even 100 seconds of training against a blind old man with a sword, to which the hero replied that he would try to endure more next time. The protagonist opened his eyes. Looking away, the man asked why he was shivering from the cold again. Chuck clenched his teeth tightly. Glowing dots appeared on his body. Particles in the blood began to accelerate. Sitting in front of him, John asked that this was better, to which the hero replied that yes, thank you. The old man looked ahead. A thought appeared that John pressed on the vessels, and this stimulated the metabolic processes. This helped him ease the inhibition of the sensation of heat. Standing in front of the hero, he said that it was time for him to go. Turning around, the man said that he should take care of himself. Except for him, he had no one to train with, to which the protagonist thanked him. Looking straight ahead, Chuck thought that if he hadn't been helped, he wouldn't have survived. The sunset appeared. Lying on the ground, the hero thought about how he had gotten a chance to live his life again, and how so many people had helped him. He looked ahead in bewilderment. An emblem appeared on the hero's back. The protagonist's eyes widened, thinking that it couldn't be. Was it possible? It was somehow unnatural. Images of people appeared. A thought appeared that why after he returned people became so kind to him. An area where he lived in his past life, there was no place for compassion between people. What was going on? The man stopped, hearing the appeal, to which he replied that he noticed her presence from afar. Frowning, Scarlet said that she knew that as soon as she returned from this mountain, she would burn him like a match. Let him think about it. She hadn't washed for a couple of days. It happens to everyone. She asked him, wide-eyed, what he had been training with the boy, to which the old man replied that yes, he moved with difficulty, but he was making progress day by day. Smiling, the girl asked him why he was trying so hard for him. He was only interested in martial arts, to which John replied that he had been asked for help. Frowning, he added that she had actually made the scrolls for him herself, and asked what was wrong with her. The girl looked at him in bewilderment. A purple glow appeared. It was her that she did not know, but the hero put his hand to his face. It was her that when she saw him, she could not remain indifferent. The protagonist looked ahead. Smiling, he asked, "Well, okay, why complicate things? He was just lucky." The mountain appeared. Half a year later, a view of the sky opened up. The hero held the weapon tightly in his hands. He swung the spear to the side. The protagonist was breathing heavily. He fell to the ground. Chuck hung his head down. He looked ahead tiredly. The guy looked at him and said hello. He grinned and said that he thought he would give up in 6 months. But a year had already passed, and he was still with them. The hero stood up. Looking at him, Flam asked why he was silent. They hadn't seen each other for so long. Let him say at least something. A mark appeared on the hero's neck. It was her that he took the voice ban. Closing his eyes, Flam asked what he took. Because the 6 months had already passed, he chose the most convenient one. Standing in front of him, he added that he thought that he would choose only the most difficult bans, but he could not pull it off. Suddenly, the hero pulled the weapon out in front of him. Looking at the spear, the guy thought that, however, the protagonist swung the weapon. The thought arose that he had changed beyond recognition in these 6 months. His blows, movements were verified and flawless, and the movements that Brittany taught him, he honed to perfection. Putting his hand to his face, Flam said that it seemed that even a larva can crawl far if it crawls long and decisively. Grinning, the guy asked but is that really all he can do, even with 5 prohibitions? The hero waved his weapon. The guy watched him silently. He grabbed the weapon abruptly. Frowning, Flam asked why he was ignoring him, said that he knew he had no voice, but that was no excuse. He could see everything on his face, his lips. Grinning, the protagonist asked why he had nothing better to do. The guy answered with wide eyes that it wouldn't work. He could afford to be arrogant with him, but he shouldn't even think about it. Standing in front of him, Chuck asked what he would do. Kill him. Wasn't he the one who told him about the prohibition of violence? Suddenly, the guy snatched the spear from him. The hero fell to the ground. Laughing, Flam said that it was a pitiful sight, crawling on the ground like a maggot. Frowning, the protagonist thought, so it means it is possible to deal indirect damage, and the guy added that he should look at himself. Smiling, Flam asked that he couldn't even do that, could he? Chuck looked surprised and thought that the chi of the weapon. Extending the spear to the side, the guy asked that, well, how much longer will he last? 5 years, 10 years? In his opinion, he will never reach his level, even if he trains here until old age. A glow appeared around the spear. It was heard that the world is unfair. Yes, he has to crawl with sweat and blood to the top, while he can easily run there. Looking straight ahead, the hero heard that so much effort, and he does not get anything for it. Is there any point in this? Will he continue? To which he replied that yes. Flam looked at him in amazement. Standing in front of the guy, the protagonist said that he could despair and lament that he did not have a drop of innate talent. Thank you for coming. He was bored studying alone. The sky seemed, it was heard that for him his achievements were ridiculous, but he could work hard and consistently. Unlike geniuses like him, no matter how much he had to crawl like a larva, he would continue. So, smiling, Chuck said that he should continue laughing. The day would come when his spear would pierce him, and then, most likely, he would no longer find it funny. The guy stood silently in front of him. The tree was collapsing from the spear. Looking straight ahead, Flam thought. The hero stood still. Grinning, the guy said that, well, that was even interesting. He would really look forward to that day. But if he gave up and cried. Looking at him, the protagonist replied that he should not even hope. The protagonist stood before the goddess. It was said that in a month Chuck would have to spend a year as an adept on Mount Mercer, and it was necessary to choose a new prohibition. Looking straight ahead, the hero said that hearing. He lowered his head. A thought appeared that this prohibition was one of the most painful. From now on his hearing was constantly filled with a terrible noise, which was impossible to get used to. The protagonist swung his weapon. A thought appeared that 6 prohibitions, Chuck spent every day on the brink of survival, and still his hands did not tremble when he fought with a spear. The hero blocked the blow. He used the skill hold. The protagonist struck. Chuck meditated. It was said about the improved technique of the spear of the ninth sky, Chuck's style, the path of the purple dawn, the technique of flight of the soul without a shadow. John stood in front of him. A thought appeared about training with him. Brittany ran forward quickly. Scarlet looked straight ahead. It was said that, in fact, she had nothing to do with it. The hero walked straight. The thought arose that the stronger he became, the heavier his body became, the more disgusting the taste of food, the more terrible the nightmares. The protagonist looked ahead. It was said that, and the more he felt cold, and a constant, unbearable noise in his ears. The guy pointed at him. The thought arose that, but sometimes all this even helped and constructively distracted, at the moments when Flam came and bothered with his annoying bragging. A larva appeared. It was said that slowly, like a larva, Chuck developed. The hero opened his eyes in surprise. Looking at the goddess, he asked why she called him, because half a year had not yet passed, and he should not add a ban. Looking at him, Mercer turned and said that he had passed the path of her trials. Frowning, the protagonist asked what she was talking about. Smiling, the guy said that he would explain now. Chuck shuddered in amazement and asked again, and the goddess said that if in simple terms, then the matter is this. Smiling, Mercer said that the existence of Flam itself is a test. Now he understands. The hero looked in amazement and thought that's what it is. The adepts appeared. It was said that Brittany, Scarlet, John subsequently passed the test on this mountain. They all became famous in area. The guy stood still. The thought arose that but he had never heard of any Flam. If he had come out of this mountain, thanks to his talent he would be even more famous than them. Looking straight, the hero said that he suspected that something was wrong with him, but he could not even imagine that he was not real. Putting his hand to his face, Flam said that yes, the whole meaning of his existence is to drive the adepts to despair with his achievements. He raised his weapon. It was heard that Brittany, Scarlet, John, even those who were very gifted, despaired, seeing how easy everything was for him. Flam grinned and said that they tried to avoid him, turned up their noses, and he. The hero smiled. It was heard that despite the fact that he was born without a drop of talent, he did not turn away from it, but on the contrary, made it his motivation. Frowning, the guy said that he took on even more difficulties, not the best decision, but he still could not make him despair. Smiling, the goddess said that she liked his recklessness. The protagonist opened his eyes in amazement. Standing in front of him, Mercer said that this is all, let him not tell the other adepts who Flam really is, otherwise he will incur the wrath of the goddess. Chuck frowned when he heard if he wanted to continue his path of trials on her mountain, to which he replied that of course. Closing her eyes, the goddess said that his reward would be waiting for him when he decided to leave Mount Mercer. The hero looked angrily when he heard that he would give her his soul, and she would give him power that he would not have achieved even in 100 years of cultivation, to which he replied that he did not need such deals. The girl grinned and asked what she meant, will work and crawls slowly towards the goal. The hero opened his eyes in amazement. The adepts appeared. It was said that he hated the word work so much. For everyone the starting point is different. No matter how hard he worked, he could not keep up with the talented. But the talented must also work. He hated those who, without taking into account the inclinations and initial conditions of a person, said that you just need not be lazy and work on yourself. The hero stretched out his hand forward. The thought arose that, but on the other hand, he really wanted to work. He spent his past life clinging to the lack of talent as an excuse for everything, so he always stayed in one place and achieved nothing. The protagonist stood still. The question arose, what is his new life? The girl stood still. It was said that many fateful meetings, no more excuses and indulgences to themselves. The mark appeared. The thought arose that having broken away from the comfort of excuses, he had no choice but to move forward. Only in this life does he really work on himself, overcome himself. Smiling, the hero said that he would crawl to the very end. Mercer looked at him happily. The thought arose that in this life he fell in love with the word work. Closing her eyes, she said that a short monologue, if she allows. Turning around, the goddess said that in area there are no coincidences. Everything has a reason and a beginning. People came out of the portals. It was heard that Area was calling aliens from other worlds to her. They were given an advantage in the form of skills. Mercer asked, with her eyes wide open, why, what was the reason? The hero looked at her in surprise and thought, what is she talking about? She said that she would talk to herself, but she was definitely saying this to him. The goddess stood still. A thought appeared. Does this mean that she is saying something that he should not know, and therefore she is talking about it as if indirectly? But why? They stood silently. Particles appeared around the man. It was heard that his return meant that someone or something wanted him to return, and something incredible was about to happen. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist heard that since he had returned to the past, he should prepare himself. He should be ready for what gave him a second chance. The starry sky appeared. The girl grinned and thought, well, that's it. She looked straight ahead. The goddess extended her hand forward and said that he should stop immediately. This is her abode. Frowning, she added that he should retreat, otherwise she would destroy him. A crack appeared in the sky. Suddenly it began to heal. The hero looked at it in bewilderment. His eyes widened when he heard that he should return immediately. Looking to the side, Mercer said that he had little time. He should return and continue training. Suddenly, the protagonist evaporated. Looking straight ahead, the goddess wondered if he would be able to stop the end. The mark on the hero's back appeared. It was heard that the world. The smell flew near the nose. It was said that 2 days later, the 6th ban, which he took, was a ban on smell. Worse could not come up. Scarlet looked ahead. A thought appeared that the stench from Scarlet's hair constantly irritated his nose. Chuck looked down, hearing that maybe he chose the wrong ban. Looking to the side, he turned to the girl. Looking straight, the hero said that the worse the ban, the greater the reward. When he swallows saliva, he almost feels sick, but otherwise bearable. Brittany stuck out her tongue. It was said that in addition to the already known, she now had a ban on hearing and taste. Her constant suffering from these bans was great. The girl grinned and said that she only now understood what he went through. a thought appeared that now it was much harder for her than with the previous bands. Looking straight ahead, the hero heard that taking away feelings is terrible, to which he chuckled. The protagonist looked in bewilderment, hearing that she needed to tell him something. Standing in front of him, the girl said that she would soon leave this mountain. She silently looked forward. Chuck opened his eyes in amazement. The girl crossed her arms. It was said that in general, for Brittany, the mountain's trials were unnecessary. Her talent, so, outshines everyone. Looking at her, the hero thought that she had been going through trials for 2 years. I am sure she has already achieved all her goals. The girl nodded her head, hearing that she was leaving, then, to which she responded approvingly. Standing in front of him, Brittany asked what and he, to which the protagonist replied that he would stay. Lowering her gaze, the adept said that it was clear. Lowering his head, Chuck asked that they would meet again, to which the girl replied that she was sure of it. She smirked, looking at him. The hero looked down. A thought occurred to him that they had known each other for a year. The little boy he had been was now as tall as her. Looking at him, Brittany thought that if she left, he might die. A few more prohibitions, and he would not be able to bear them anymore. Pursing her lips, she added that she had never taught him the full mastery of the soul's flight without a shadow. Maybe she should stay for that. Looking at her, the protagonist said that he could handle it. Smirking, he added that thanks to her, he had lasted so long, and now he could handle it himself. She probably had plans. Let her go. There was no need to stay just because of him. The girl looked in amazement, hearing that he thanked her for everything. If not for her, he would no longer be alive. Brittany smirked, hearing this. She hugged the hero. Chuck looked away in bewilderment. He frowned. Suddenly the hero calmed down. They stood and hugged. The forest appeared. The girl took a step back. The protagonist grinned, hearing that she knew he could handle it. He was the strongest person she had ever met in her life. The sky appeared. She heard why she thought so, to which the girl replied that he never gave up. Looking straight at her, Chuck replied that it was not true. He fell into despair again and again. He just somehow managed to get up and move on. Looking at him, Brittany said that this was his strength. She could not stand it, meeting Flam face to face. The hero grinned, hearing that he was a younger brother. Looking straight at him, the adept said that he should take care of himself and not die. Raising his eyebrows, the protagonist replied that he would never die. The followers walked forward. The thought appeared that so, Brittany left. John and Scarlet also soon left the mountain. He was left completely alone. Walking forward, Chuck thought about how he had become so unaccustomed to the feeling of loneliness. The hero swung his weapon. It was said that he remembered what he was like before he met anyone. He did not trust anyone. People were smiling. The thought appeared that, but now he understood that a person cannot exist alone. Looking up, the protagonist thought that if it were not for them, he would have died. Chuck raised his head up. Grinning, he thought that something in his heart had changed. An invisible wall had fallen. Stamping his foot, the hero added that at that moment he no longer felt the heaviness, no stench, did not hear any more noise. He rushed forward sharply, thinking that the feeling of freedom was fleeting, but it seemed that it lasted forever. The usual views suddenly changed. The protagonist flew up. A thought appeared that of course, because he, as such, no longer existed, he became different, and after him, the world around him changed. The beetle climbed a tree. It was said that summer had come. The singing of cicadas was heard. The girl stretched her hand forward. A thought appeared that in 7 years Brittany would meet Chloe in the dungeon, and would be killed by her. Rays appeared. It was said that he must repay Brittany with kindness. He must save her from this death. The hero waved his weapon. The spear stopped near the beetle. Raising his head, the protagonist thought that it was a cicada. A larva appeared. It was said that cicada larvae lie in the ground for 10 years before developing into an adult cicada. He only has 7 years to prevent this murder. Chuck looked up. A thought appeared that 7 years. I wonder what he can achieve, whether he can at all. He grinned and thought, no, he can do it, period. The hero held the weapon in his hands. The thought came that although each day brought new achievements, Chuck was not enough. He tried to increase the intensity time after time. He cut down on his sleep hours, and used this time to train with a spear. An image of a man appeared. The thought came that the next man, he heard that how he navigates without sight. Everything is simple. The hero looked straight and thought that he needs to focus on other senses, and remember the environment well. It was said that the world was plunged into darkness. The only thing Chuck could rely on was touch. After a week he could already move a little. Hearing did not help him in this dark world, because it was filled with deafening sounds. The protagonist held the spear in his hands. The thought arose that one day the noise began to resemble the singing of cicadas, and in the flow of cicada singing Chuck forgot about the passage of time. He continued to work with the spear. His body got used to performing the techniques automatically, and he could devote more time to thinking. The hero took a step forward, thinking that if he was a larva, then what would he like to become? He would like to become a cicada. A beetle appeared. The thought arose that when a larva climbs to the surface, it first makes a song, and then becomes a cicada. The protagonist clenched his teeth tightly. Looking straight ahead, he thought about what he wanted to become, why he came back, why. Chuck stood still. The thought arose that summer had passed. He began to feel that he was getting colder. The hero held the weapon in his hands and thought that his routine, however, remained the same. He just trains with a spear, season after season passes, and he gets used to a world full of darkness. The cosmos appeared. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist said that he wanted to complete the trials. He closed one eye. Chuck looked at his hand and exclaimed. Standing in front of him, the goddess asked him what it was like to feel again after such a long trial, to which the hero replied that it was nice to be free of time. Looking at his hand, he added that his eyes could see again. There was no more stench in his nose, no more deafening noises in his ears. His body was light as a feather, and there was no more constant frost on his skin. This was true freedom. The girl looked at him in bewilderment, to which Chuck asked again. Smiling, Mercer said that she was thinking about what reward he deserved. The hero frowned, hearing that he had spent 3 long years on her mountain, endured difficult trials. The man was crushed by a stone. It was heard that there were such students in her time, who, out of impetuosity, took on an unbearable number of prohibitions, and it ended sadly. Either they left or died. Closing her eyes, the goddess said that there should be more students like him. She sincerely wishes to bring him the best of gifts for his efforts, therefore. The protagonist looked surprised, hearing that he should say what he needs. He opened his eyes wide and asked that she could give him the ability to martial arts, to which the girl replied that she could not. Chuck put his hand to his face. Chloe stretched her hand forward. It was heard that he had a goal. To achieve it, he should not waste time on trifles. He had little time. Clenching his fist, the hero said that he wanted to become many times stronger, but he did not know how to achieve this. Frowning, he asked that she could give him what he needed. The starry sky appeared. Smiling, Mercer said that since it came to that, she guessed that he needed time. The protagonist asked again in amazement, hearing that she could give him time. Stretching her hand forward, the girl said that he should go to Orimer, show Dinur this sign. The symbol appeared. It was heard that Dinur was the god of time. He would give him a test. Closing her eyes, the goddess said that but let him know. Her tests will seem like flowers to him, although she thinks that this is what will attract him to them. Raising her hand, she added that just like here, in Dinur's abode, he would receive as a reward for the trials he had passed exactly as much as they were difficult, the dangers and difficulties awaiting him. Grinning, the hero said that this was exactly what he needed. Raising her hands up, Mercer said that this was his first reward. For his victory over Flam, the next reward would be for 3 years of trials. The starry sky appeared. It was heard that she was generous. The gods are not petty. Looking straight ahead, the goddess said that this was his second reward. A man appeared next to her. It was heard that with the help of her patronage he would be able to enter the ranks of Erebris. Closing his eyes, the guy said that let him introduce himself. Putting his hand behind his back, he said that his name was Neville. He was a representative of the Erebris Guild. Looking at the hero, Neville asked what she wanted to recommend this gentleman to them, to which the goddess replied that she did. The protagonist looked surprised, hearing that with all due respect, she was afraid he was not up to the level of their guild. Looking straight ahead, Mercer said that he should take a closer look. Lowering his head, the guy said that he was asking for forgiveness. Indeed, having looked closer, he realized that he was right for them. Looking at the hero, he added that he should forgive him for the misunderstanding. He made this conclusion based on his low level of martial arts, to which the protagonist asked again. Looking straight ahead, Chuck said that in his years he had reached a fairly high level of martial arts. Usually a person with such a level is respected in society. Is it really still a low level for their guild? Stretching his hand forward, the hero asked what kind of guild this was, to which the guy replied, Erebris. The symbol appeared. It was heard that they supply elite clients with the rarest and most exquisite goods. And not only that, they accept orders for goods, hold auctions for rare artifacts, obtain information. They provide him with everything he wants. Looking at it, the protagonist asked what auctions. So they are merchants of elixirs and books on martial arts, to which the guy replied that of course. The guild auction appeared. It was heard that it can't be. What is this? The Great Shaolin Elixir of Restoration. But this can't be bought for money. They even have the Hua Mountain Sex technique of the Plum Blossom Sword, and the Wudang Mountain Sex technique of the Taiji Sword. Neville closed his eyes and said that this is their work. He will be pleased with the assortment of rarities and curiosities of the Erebris Guild. I must say, they are well informed. Looking straight ahead, the hero asked if she was also in this guild, to which Mercer replied that of course, their services were very useful to her. Frowning, the protagonist thought about the fact that this trading guild had a goddess as a client. Who were they really? Stretching his hand forward, Neville asked what he would say. Would he agree to become a client of the Erebris Guild? The protagonist nodded his head and answered that he agreed, and then thought that he had nothing to lose. Pointing to the scroll, the guy said that he should sign here. Putting the envelope under his jacket, he said that congratulations, he was now a client of the Erebris Guild, looking forward to the start of their cooperation. Snapping his finger, Neville said that there was a special prize from him personally. A glow appeared around the hero. Standing in front of him, the guy said that this is better, and the goddess said that it was wonderful. She did not like that he had grown his hair almost like hers. Bowing, Neville said that it was time for him to go. If he needed him, he should call him at any time, to which the hero responded approvingly. Standing in front of the hero, the goddess asked if he liked her reward, to which the protagonist replied that he was very pleased, thank her. The girl grinned and said that becoming an honorary buyer in the Erebreeze Guild is a great honor, let him appreciate it, and then asked where he was going now. Looking at her, Chuck said that first of all, he thinks to be hanger. The hero raised his eyebrows, hearing that as he wishes, and also. Standing still, the girl said that he should never forget her monologue. The protagonist walked forward and thought that there was a reason for his return. In Area nothing happens without a reason. The animals looked at him. The thought appeared that she said so. What does this mean? How lucky he is in this life. Looking straight ahead, the hero thought that meeting Chloe. The beast stuck out its tongue. A thought arose that meeting Brittany, her help, wasn't it a coincidence? A blow flew at the monster. It was said that if not, then who arranged it? Swinging the weapon, the protagonist thought that somehow it didn't matter. He didn't want an extra headache. A glow appeared around the weapon. It was said that 3 years of training in the mountains. Blood dripped from the spear. A thought arose that they made him a supreme master of martial arts. Raising the weapon up, Chuck thought that his body was 18 years old, and he was already a supreme master. People would think that he was some kind of natural genius. Grinning, he added that his skill was obtained with sweat and blood, and luck in the form of fateful meetings, and then said that he had a long way to go. Taking a step forward, the hero thought that there would be many more unexpected acquaintances, and all this would make him stronger. Walking straight, he added that he needed to go to Behanger, but first he would become a mercenary. The protagonist smiled and thought that his adventure was beginning. The armor appeared. It was said that Devnok was a magic armor. It was found in the dungeon of a black magician in the vicinity of Behanger. The man put his hand to his chest. A thought arose that this luck befell a rank C mercenary. He stretched out his weapon in front of him. A thought arose that the properties of this armor were truly incredible. In it even a rank C mercenary received the level of martial arts, the supreme master. Looking straight, the hero thought that if the supreme martial artist obtained this armor, it would increase his level to a martial artist. Sitting by the fire, he added that he could continue the tests on Mount Mershire, but he wanted to use this opportunity. In 6 months, as far as he knew from his past life, the dungeon of the black magician would be destroyed. Frowning, the protagonist thought that his immediate goal was to become a famous mercenary in Behanger, so that he could participate in this raid. The mercenary guild building appeared, and he heard that he wanted to be a mercenary. Looking straight ahead, the man asked what but why he was telling him this. He was just an innkeeper. Looking to the side, he added that he should go up to the 2nd floor, where the guild scribe was sitting, and asked him. He was busy. Smiling, the man asked that he was aiming to become a mercenary. Why he needed this? He would be better off getting a job in the kitchen, washing dishes. Suddenly, he looked in amazement and added that where had his fork gone? A glow appeared around the fork. The man closed his eyes and said that the weapon he was not bad at it, which meant that he was a supreme master of martial arts. The lamp hung on the ceiling. It was heard that he was asking for forgiveness for his tone. Let him sit down. The mercenaries looked ahead in bewilderment. The man was sitting in front of the hero. Looking straight ahead, he said that let him introduce himself. He is Bob, a magician. He is the leader of the mercenary guild in Behanger. The protagonist looked at him, hearing that the innkeeper was just his favorite job, to which he thought that he knew this. That is why he spoke to him. People were sitting at the tables. The thought arose that in his past life he got a job as a mercenary in this guild, in Behanger. Holding the papers in his hands, the magician said that as a rule, if a supreme master of martial arts gets a job as a mercenary, they immediately give him S rank. Stretching his hand forward, the man said that, however, they need to be sure that he is not just an inexperienced youth who did nothing but train in the mountains. Chuck frowned when he heard that they needed warriors. He thought he understood that they had to test him in battle, to which he responded approvingly. Putting his hand to his face, Bob said that it was fine. He would find him a suitable order. His partner would be another S-rank mercenary, so he had nothing to worry about. Looking straight ahead, the hero heard that he could handle it. He would approve him as an S-rank mercenary. He was coming, to which he responded that he agreed. The blue sky appeared. It was heard that he was silent, like a fish. He was always like that. Looking at the mercenary, the protagonist said that well, yeah, something like that, and then thought that the years of loneliness on Mount Mershire had left their mark, to which the man replied that he was a boring guy. Harvey smiled broadly and said that he had a better opinion of him when he saw how skillfully he fooled that idiot in the tavern, how he plans to charm girls if he has such a stone face. The hero silently looked at him. Looking down, the mercenary said that yeah, he will have no end of dvat, in fact. He looked ahead disappointedly. A thought occurred to him that his name was Harvey. He was a rank S mercenary from the guild. In his past life he only knew him by name, but did not communicate. The man clenched his fist. It was said that he would be his partner on this mission. He would closely monitor how he was doing. Smiling, he asked what and had he ever fought an ogre. Frowning, the protagonist replied that he had not. A monster appeared. The thought arose that ogres, one of the strongest monsters in area, have moderate resistance to magic, and their skin is hard as steel. The man jumped in fear. It was said that their task was to kill the ogre. This order came from the villagers. One of them saw the ogre in the forest. Walking forward, Harvey said that 2 rank S mercenaries. They are quite enough to deal with the ogre, let him not worry. The forest appeared. It was heard that only this strange forest. Looking straight ahead, the mercenary said that he was too small for the ogre. Looking at him, Chuck asked, "What do you mean?" Raising his hands up, the man replied that he should think about it. Ogres are large monsters, usually 3 to 5 meters tall. Such a huge creature needs a lot of food. Standing behind a tree, the hero heard that in a small forest like this, his food would quickly run out. Looking down, he said that he should wait. The man looked at him in amazement and said that yes, that's it. Looking at the animal, he asked what was monstrous. Was it a deer? To which the protagonist replied that it looked like it. Frowning, Harvey said that tearing living creatures apart. Only an ogre has such strength, but... Looking down, the protagonist said that there was no sign that he killed for meat. Looking to the side, the man replied that for sure, that was strange. Besides, they still hadn't seen any droppings. They opened their eyes in amazement. Suddenly, the beast stretched its hand forward. They abruptly grabbed their weapons. The hero looked to the side. The man was looking at him. Suddenly, they rushed forward. The protagonist stopped abruptly. The monster stood in front of them. They looked at it in bewilderment. Frowning, the man said that this was not what they had agreed on. Chuck frowned when he heard that they would run away. They could not handle this. The monster stretched out his hand to the side. His body appeared. His skin was stitched together with bones. Suddenly the ogre swung his hand. He looked forward. It was heard that the ogre was a chimera. The monster appeared. It was said that a chimera is a magical creation made from parts of different monsters. Its creators pursue the goal of making the most perfect monster. The man stood still. The thought appeared that each species has its shortcomings, and they can be leveled out if a monster is sewn on a part of another monster's body. The goblin stuck out his tongue. It was heard that even an F-rank goblin could be made into a chimera that would pose the same danger as a B-rank monster, because such a chimera was much less predictable than a simple goblin. An ogre appeared. It was said that here is a chimera made from an ogre. The man gritted his teeth and thought that even S-rank mercenaries would not be able to cope with such a monster. The hero looked straight ahead. Suddenly, the monster raised its hands up. It looked down. The protagonist watched it silently. The ogre swung its hand sharply. The fist stopped in front of Chuck. The man turned around abruptly. The hero froze in surprise. His eyes widened. The protagonist raised his leg up. Chuck used the technique of flight of the soul without a shadow, the first move, a traceless run. The man watched from behind a tree in amazement. Looking straight ahead, the hero thought that he was fast. How long had he become like this? Well, this is not Mount Mercier. The ban on lightness has not been pressing on him for a long time. The ogre swung his hand. The thought appeared that well. The protagonist abruptly rushed along his hand. He jumped up. Chuck extended his weapon in front of him. He delivered a sharp blow to the monster. Frowning, the hero thought that the skin was like stone. The monster looked at him in bewilderment. Looking at them, the mercenary thought that it could not be penetrated even by a spear charged with chi energy, not a scratch. Gritting his teeth, he added that damn, the reward they would only be given as for an ordinary ogre. It was not worth it at all. Taking a step forward, the man thought that it was too late to run. He did not know if they would succeed, but he had to help him. Harvey looked in amazement, hearing that he could not do this. Looking at the monster, the man thought that telepathy. Frowning, the hero heard that he was out of his mind. It was a chimera ogre, to which he replied that he knew. Harvey opened his eyes wide and said that he knew nothing. He had never even fought an ogre. His spear did not pierce him. Did not he see? He was even stronger than a two-headed ogre. Looking straight ahead, the protagonist thought, well, yes, but that's why. The monster grinned. The thought arose that why he had a feeling that he could win. Chuck abruptly struck him. The tree was torn out by the roots. The monster stood still. Frowning, the man shouted that no, even so nothing would happen to him. It was impenetrable. Gritting his teeth, he thought that it was strong. Even if he helped it, it would not affect anything. The protagonist held the spear in his hands. The ogre looked down. A glow flew around the weapon. Suddenly Chuck jumped up. Smiling, he asked what was interesting, and his eyes were just as hard. A blow appeared. The hero thrust his spear into the monster's eye. Harvey froze in surprise and thought that the ogre was distracted by the red ribbon on the spear, and taking advantage of this, he struck right in the eye. The protagonist ran forward. A thought appeared that this guy, he is young, but he is so masterful with a spear. Standing in front of the ogre, Chuck thought, well. Grinning, he added that at least he hit the eye. He will achieve his goal. Suddenly, the hero looked in amazement. A hole appeared in the monster's eye. Suddenly it was restored. The ogre looked straight ahead. A thought appeared that it healed itself. Frowning, Harvey shouted that he knew it. This ogre is crossed with a troll, therefore this chimera also has the ability to regenerate. The monster looked at his hand. A thought appeared that it looks like he cannot defeat him with physical force. Looking straight ahead, the hero thought about what to do. The monster swung his hand. The man froze in surprise. The protagonist frowned. He stood next to the girl. A thought appeared that he had plans for his life. The ogre extended his hand towards the hero. Frowning, Chuck thought that so he should not risk his life in vain. He will not die here. The green giant attacked, rushing at Chuck. The hero prepared to defend himself. A pink light enveloped him. Chloe stood in front of him with a spear in her hands. The chief recalled the 3 basic techniques of wielding a spear, that from this day on he must repeat them every day until he honed them. Chuck looked ahead in confusion and thought about Chloe. The evil ogre attacks, and the guy thinks that he trained them endlessly, just like Chloe said. The tip of the spear began to spin around the orc's fingers. Chuck spun the spear, defending himself. A pink light formed. He thought that it was time to sum it up. In the memories, Chloe held out the spear and said that parrying reflects the enemy's attack with an outward movement. The hero reflected the monster's attack with a parry. The orc raised his hand up, looking at Chuck. The guy sharply thrust the spear into the monster's chest. The orc looked with crazy eyes and raised his hand. He completed the attack, covering the main character. Chuck looked at the enemy with a serious face, and thought that the block is the result of a downward rotational movement, blocking the enemy's weapon. He put out the spear, aiming at the orc's strike. The hero spun the weapon around the monster's hand, blocking. The man looked up and screamed loudly. The green giant missed, hitting past the target. The hero held out the spear and thought about the strike. He looked at the enemy's lower limb. Chuck attacked the giant, thrusting the spear into his leg. The hero hung on the weapon, blood spurted from his leg. The orc opened his eyes wide, feeling the pain. The guy pulled out the spear, thinking that it was effective and that, as he thought, his joints were vulnerable. The giant bent down to the ground, leaning on his hand. Beads of sweat appeared on the orc's face. He quickly struck, missing, into the ground. Chuck looked at him puzzled and wondered how long it would take him to restore his broken joint, but it did not matter. The guy struck with the weapon, piercing the other knee through and through. He broke the handle with his knee, leaving a part in his joint. Chuck jumped back and thought that he would die before the end of regeneration. The ogre looked at his wounded leg. The guy thought that with the spear inside he would not be able to recover. Chuck looked up at his opponent and asked if it was true. The hero struck from above downwards, breaking through the monster's shoulder. He hit him and said that now your legs and right arm are immobilized. The giant, kneeling, tried to reach for the broken shoulder and Chuck continued the attack. The hero looked at him calmly and thought about doing it again. An improved technique of the Spear of the Ninth Sky, the second move and a lightning-splitting strike are reported. The hero attacks using a large number of strikes. The monster does not react to the fast strikes. The orc threw back his hand and struck. The tip of Chuck's spear lit up with a purple light. He looked calmly and thought that he was slow. The hero ran his foot along the ground and thought that he had become faster and no longer felt the weight. An insect was sitting on something. Flies were flying around the guy. He heard the chirping of cicadas. The protagonist attacks the enemy and realizes that these are the same obstacles as on Mount Mercer. The guy jumped on the orc and continued to think that he does not want to become a cicada, although he was a larva on the mountain. The insect larva lies on the ground and the guy reasons that he has not pupated to become a cicada or something else. He wonders who he wants to become in that case. Chuck looked furiously at the enemy and thought that he does not know who. He pierced both of the giant's eyes and thought that he definitely does not want to be a cicada. The hero raised his spear above himself and thought that he does not want to regret, because something like this already happened in his first life and he does not know how his current path will end. He only develops and prepares for the future until he reaches the end. Harvey looked at what was happening in horror. The protagonist, bowing his head down, furiously finished off the enemy. The man looked at the murder scene and asked who the hell he was. The protagonist looked ahead emotionlessly. He looked at the sky and wondered who he was. Chuck's gaze dropped to his hand. It was covered in calluses. The guy looked at it and laughed, thinking that he didn't know. His palm clenched into a fist, and he thought that he was sure of one thing. The protagonist did not turn to the man and said that he was not a larva. Beads of sweat appeared on the man's face. He smiled and asked what kind of nonsense he was talking, adding that he was an interesting dude. The cicada was lying upside down on the ground. Chuck grinned and looked at the man in armor, realizing that the cicadas were no longer chirping. The man with the mustache looked in surprise. Harvey actively pointed towards Chuck. Bob looked at what had happened and thought that killing the Chimera Ogre was definitely an achievement equal to the SS rank, and said that no one had ever gotten the SS rank to begin with. The protagonist looked unperturbed and replied that the S rank was enough, because it didn't change much and he was happy with the current state of affairs.